Drift back with me now, through the haze of millennia, peeling away the layers of history like the translucent skins of an onion. Let the noise of the modern world, the hum of electricity, the roar of engines, the relentless ticking of digital clocks, fade into a profound and heavy silence. We are journeying to a time before the maps were drawn, before the continents were fully settled in their current embrace, to a world held in the velvet grip of a perpetual twilight. This is the deep breath of the planet before the chaotic exhale of civilization. Imagine the great Rift Valley as it might have appeared 300,000 years ago. The sun does not merely rise here, it ignites the horizon, a slow-burning ember that turns the vast swaying grasslands into a sea of liquid gold. The air is thick, palpable, heavy with the scent of crushed ferns, damp loam, and the musky, sweet perfume of animals that have no names in our modern tongues. Here the only music is the rhythmic pulse of the wilderness, the low, vibrating thrum of insects in the tall grass, the distant, thundering percussion of hooves on the dry earth, and the sigh of the wind as it weaves through the acacia thorns. In this ancient silence, humanity was a rare and fragile thing, a small flicker of consciousness moving across a landscape of giants. We were not the masters of this domain. We were its students, watching from the shadows, learning the language of the lion and the hyena. And within the bodies of these early wanderers, within the very marrow of their bones, a silent river flowed with a singular ancient consistency. Consider for a moment the miracle of this blood. In the time before the shadow, before the great division of types, the blood of our ancestors was a uniform ocean. It was a river of life that carried the signature of the earth itself, a molecular testament to our origins. Science, in its cold precision, calls this the rhesus factor, a protein, a tiny complex architecture on the surface of the red blood cell. But let us step away from the microscope and see it for what it truly was in that dawn of time, a badge of belonging. For millions of years, this scarlet ink wrote the same story in every vein of every hominid that walked the earth. It was a story of connection, of a deep and unbroken chain linking the upright walker on the savannah to the primate in the canopy. The rhesus factor was a bridge. It bound the wandering soul of the early human to a common, primal heritage. To have this protein, to be positive, was the rule of life. It was the biological standard, the factory setting of the primate order. There was no deviation. There was no whisper of difference in the fluid that sustained us. Picture a hunter from this lost epoch. Let us call him the first walker. His skin is weathered by the relentless African sun, textured like the bark of the baobab tree. He stands atop a ridge of volcanic rock, his eyes scanning the horizon for the movement of herds. Feel the heat radiating off the black stone beneath his calloused feet. Feel the dry air filling his lungs, oxygen rushing into his bloodstream to bind with the iron in his cells. Inside him, a microscopic universe is at work. His heart, a muscular drum, pumps this life force through a labyrinth of veins and arteries. Every single one of his red blood cells bristles with the rhesus protein. It is a presence, a physical structure that asserts, I am of this world. I am of this lineage. If he were to be injured, if the horn of a buffalo were to graze his thigh, or a jagged piece of flint were to slice his palm, his blood would spill onto the dust, identical in its fundamental architecture to the blood of his brother, his mother, his rival, and even the monkeys chattering in the distant trees. This uniformity was a kind of biological peace. In this era, the concept of blood rejection was unknown to the logic of evolution. A mother in this primeval world, carrying a child in her womb, lived in a state of harmonious synthesis. Her blood and the blood of her infant spoke the same chemical language. There were no silent wars fought across the placenta, no antibodies rising like armies to attack the unborn. The protein was the password, and every soul possessed the key. The sun rose and set over a humanity that was, in its very essence, uniform. We were children of the dust, carrying the same molecular stamp as the creatures that watched us from the shadows. Let us linger here, in this state of stasis. It is important to feel the weight of this continuity, to understand the magnitude of what was to come. Evolution is often described as a race, a frantic scramble for survival. But for vast stretches of deep time, evolution is also a sleeper. It is a slow, methodical drift. Generation after generation, the blueprint was copied with faithful precision. The DNA helix, that twisting ladder of destiny, unzipped and replicated itself billions of times, and each time the instruction for the rhesus protein was transcribed without error. The world of the rhesus positive was a world of biological certainty. It was the era of the old blood. As these ancestors migrated, moving slowly out of the cradle of Africa, following the coastlines, venturing into the cooler climes of the Near East, they took this old blood with them. It kept them warm as the nights grew longer. It scabbed over their wounds as they learned to fight. It flushed their cheeks with color when they danced around the first fires, the flames casting long, dancing shadows against the walls of limestone caves. Imagine the sensory reality of their existence. The smell of wood smoke, sharp and stinging, clinging to hair and skin. The taste of charred meat and wild tubers. The texture of a rough stone tool, warmed by the grip of a hand. And beneath it all, the unseen, unfelt coursing of the blood, thick, rich, and chemically complete. It was a survival weapon, a finely tuned delivery system for the energy needed to outrun a leopard or endure a drought. This blood was the result of eons of trial and error, a masterpiece of adaptation that connected us to the rhesus macaques of the ancient forests, a shared lineage stretching back into the mists of the Cenozoic era. But nature, in its infinite and mysterious wisdom, abhors a perfect vacuum of change. Stability is merely a pause in the symphony of life, a holding of breath before the next note is sung. While the first walkers slept beneath the canopy of stars, stars that burned with a fierce, unpolluted clarity, the universe was preparing a quiet tectonic shift. It was not a shift of moving continents or erupting volcanoes, though those were happening too. This was a shift in the library of the self. Deep within the protected fortress of the germline, in the sanctum where the codes of future generations are written, a potential for deviation was gathering. It is the nature of life to experiment. The DNA molecule is not a rigid statue. It is a fluid, vibrating script, subject to the cosmic rays that rain down from the heavens, subject to the chaotic thermal dance of atoms. The world was changing around them. The climate began to oscillate, the grand pendulum of the ice ages beginning its slow swing. As the lush savannas gave way to drier grasslands, and as the forests retreated, the pressures on the human form began to shift. We began to rely more on our wits, our tools, and our social bonds. And perhaps, in the hidden logic of biology, the time had come for the blood itself to change. But for now, in this chapter of the shadow, we rest in the time before the anomaly. We stand on the precipice of the mutation. The world is whole. The blood is one. There is a profound beauty in this unity, a sense of a species moving as a single organism through the corridors of time. Imagine the night falling over a settlement of Homo erectus. The fire has burned down to glowing coals, painting the faces of the sleepers in shades of ochre and ash. They lie huddled together for warmth, a tangle of limbs and soft breathing. In their veins, the ancient protein stands guard, a silent sentinel that has kept watch for millions of years. They do not know that they are the last generation of pure uniformity. They do not know that soon, in a place we cannot pinpoint, in a moment that history did not record, a child will be born without the sentinel. The silence of the genome is deafening here. It is the silence of a calm sea before the rogue wave. The secret superpower, as we might call it today, was not yet a presence. It was an absence waiting to happen. It was a void waiting to be carved out of the solid rock of our biology. To understand the Rh negative blood, one must first deeply honor the Rh positive. It is the bedrock. It is the foundation. It is the heavy, fertile soil from which the strange flower of the negative trait would eventually bloom. It represents our deep time connection to the earth and to the animal kingdom. When we look at the blood of the rhesus positive today, we are looking at an unbroken line that goes back to the very dawn of mammals. It is the standard, the norm, the great yes of biological history. But the story of humanity is not just a story of yes. It is also a story of no, a story of refusal, a story of the exception. As the wheel of the stars turned overhead, shifting the constellations by fractions of a degree over centuries, the stage was being set. Perhaps it was a burst of radiation from a dying star, traveling light years to strike a single chromosome in the reproductive cells of a young female in the mountains. Perhaps it was a random copying error, a scribe's hand slipping on the parchment of life during the division of a cell. Or perhaps, as some poetic anthropologists might whisper, it was a response to a pathogen, a lock being changed to keep out an intruder that has long since vanished from the fossil record. Whatever the cause, the world before the shadow was coming to an end. The velvet grip of the twilight was loosening. The singular, ancient consistency was about to be broken. A new chapter was waiting in the darkness, ready to rewrite the rules of pregnancy, of immunity, and of identity. But for tonight, let us simply breathe in the air of this lost world. Smell the rain coming across the plains. Hear the call of the nightjar. Feel the pulse of the old blood, strong and steady, binding us to the earth, unaware that the liberation and the danger of the negative is about to begin. We are suspended here, in the amber of the past, witnessing the final moments of a biological innocence that we can never truly regain. The unity is beautiful, but the fragmentation is where the story truly begins. The wind shifts, the embers fade. The first gray light of dawn touches the eastern sky. Not just a new day, but the herald of a new kind of human. The shadow is approaching, not as a darkness, but as a different kind of light, a cool, pale light that will illuminate a different path for the children of the future. The river of blood is about to fork, and we, the silent observers of deep time, stand ready to follow the new stream. And so, the stage is set. The actors are in place. The ancient script is about to undergo a revision that will baffle scientists and mystics alike for thousands of years to come. Let us descend now, shrinking our perspective from the vast, sweeping vistas of the Great Rift Valley down into the microscopic cathedral of the human interior. We leave behind the golden grasses and the thundering herds to enter a world of profound silence and darkness, a place where the architecture of life is built not with stone or wood, but with the delicate spiraling chemistry of the stars. We are traveling into the nucleus of a single cell, deep within the body of an ancestor whose name has been lost to the grinding erosion of time. It is here, in this liquid sanctum, that the loom of life is constantly at work, weaving the threads of identity that bind the past to the future. For eons, this loom had followed a strict and ancient pattern. The tapestry of human blood was woven with a specific design, a recurring motif that we now call the rhesus factor. It was a structural certainty, a presence as reliable as the rising of the sun. The instructions were clear, written in the chemical alphabet of the genome. Build the protein, attach the marker, signal the connection to the deep primate lineage. The machinery of life, faithful and relentless, obeyed these commands without question, copying the code from mother to child, from father to daughter, across the shifting landscapes of 1,000,000 years. But the universe, in its infinite complexity, is a place of probability, not perfection. And so, we must imagine a moment. Perhaps it was a night when the cosmic rays from a distant supernova drifted through the thin atmosphere of the Pleistocene Earth. Or perhaps it was simply a random stutter in the biological transcription, a momentary lapse in the focus of the great scribe. In the stillness of the genome, where the instructions for life are woven with invisible thread, a single, inexplicable event occurred. It was not a violent rupture. The earth did not shake. The volcanoes did not erupt in sympathy. To the outside observer, the night was like any other. The wind may have been sighing through the branches of the stone pines, and the moon likely cast its cold silver indifference upon the landscape. But inside the reproductive sanctuary of a single individual, a subtle phantom omission took place. A section of the code, the specific chapter of the DNA that commanded the creation of the rhesus D antigen, was deleted. Think of it as a scribe, laboring by candlelight over a sacred text that has been copied for thousands of generations. For a split second, the hand slips, or the eye skips a line. The quill hovers, then moves on, leaving a blank space where a word should have been. This was the silent glitch, a mistake that saved us, or perhaps a mystery that defined us. The machinery of life, unaware of the error, continued its work, sealing the omission into the blueprint of a new life. The thread was cut, the pattern was altered, and the loom wove on, creating a variation that had never existed before in the history of our kind. This moment is the point zero of the Rh negative bloodline. It is the singularity from which millions of people today draw their biological heritage. Let us transport ourselves to the physical world where this cellular drama manifested. Picture a small band of humans navigating the rugged terrain of what might have been the Caucasus Mountains, or perhaps the edge of the great European peninsula. The climate is cooling. The air carries the biting promise of the encroaching ice. These are hardy people, draped in the heavy furs of bear and reindeer, their skin weathered by the wind, their eyes constantly scanning the horizon for the silhouette of a predator. Among them is a woman. She is heavy with child, her breath pluming in the chill air as she rests near the warmth of a fire that crackles with the burning of juniper wood. She is the carrier of the old blood, the rhesus positive, as is everyone she has ever known, as is everyone who has ever lived. But the child growing within her is the first of a new order. When the labor begins, it is a primal scene, played out on a bed of dried moss and animal skins in the flickering shelter of a rock overhang. The tribe gathers at a respectful distance, the murmur of their voices blending with the crackle of the fire. The struggle of birth is the eternal struggle, the bridge between the void and the world. And when the infant finally emerges, slick with the fluids of life and crying out its first protest against the cold, it appears no different from any other child born under the Pleistocene stars. The baby has 10 fingers and 10 toes. It has the dark, inquisitive eyes of its ancestors. It hungers for milk and warmth. But beneath the surface, in the crimson rivers that begin to circulate independently through its small body, a revolution has occurred. This infant does not carry the signature of the rhesus macaque. It bears a blank space, a silver silence where a protein should have been. This was the birth of the negative. It was the introduction of a biological void that carried its own strange and heavy weight. To understand the magnitude of this change, we must visualize the red blood cell itself. In the ancestors, the surface of the cell was like a textured landscape studded with the rhesus proteins, tiny molecular peaks and valleys that acted as identification tags. These tags shouted to the immune system, to the world, and to nature itself. I am here, I am standard. But in the blood of this newborn, the landscape of the cell was smooth. The peaks were gone. The identification tags were missing. It was a cell stripped of its ancient uniform, a traveler traveling incognito through the veins. This child was a biological ghost, unseen by the mechanisms that look for the rhesus marker. At first, the world did not notice. Nature is often slow to judge its own experiments. The wind still howled across the tundra, whipping the snow into blinding vortices. The mammoths still moved in great shaggy waves across the horizon, their tusks curving like the crescent moon. The great cave lions still stalked the edges of the light. The ecosystem remained indifferent to the molecular shift that had just taken place. But within this one small tribe, a new kind of human had been born. This child was a quiet rebel against the biological status quo of the entire primate world. As the days turned into months and the infant grew into a toddler, the difference remained hidden deep within the marrow. There were no outward signs, no strange markings on the skin, no difference in the shape of the skull. The boy, or perhaps it was a girl, played in the dirt with the bones of small animals, learned to chew on strips of dried meat, and laughed at the antics of the elders. Yet every beat of this child's heart was a testament to the glitch. This blood was pure in a way the world had not seen, pure in its absence. It was a fortress without a flag. And this absence, this negativity, would prove to be a double-edged sword, a duality of survival and vulnerability that would haunt and protect this lineage for millennia. Consider the environment this child navigated. The Paleolithic world was a landscape of pathogens, invisible killers that thrived in the soil, in the water, in the blood of the animals they hunted. Viruses and bacteria were constantly evolving, seeking ways to latch onto human cells, to pick the locks of our biology. The rhesus protein, ubiquitous and exposed, may have served as a handle for some of these ancient vanished plagues. It was a surface feature that a virus could grab onto, a doorway into the cell. But the negative child? The negative child had no handle. The door was smooth. The virus, seeking the familiar grip of the rhesus protein, would slide off, finding no purchase. In this way, the mistake became a shield. The glitch became a superpower. While others in the tribe might have succumbed to a fever that burned through the camp like a wildfire, the child with the smooth blood remained untouched, a silent witness to the devastation, protected by the very emptiness of their genetic code. This is the beautiful irony of evolution. Sometimes, what we lose is more important than what we gain. The deletion was not a deficit. It was a strategic withdrawal. It was a shedding of old armor that had become a liability. As this child grew to maturity, surviving the harsh attrition of the Stone Age, the silent glitch began to weave itself into the broader tapestry of the tribe. The individual became a parent. The loom of life spun again, and this time, the template of the void was passed down. The omission was copied. A lineage began to form. A thin, silver thread winding its way through the dense red fabric of the population. We must picture this diffusion of the trait not as a conquest, but as a subtle infiltration. It happened over campfires where stories were told in guttural tongues. It happened in the quiet moments of pairing, where the heat of bodies defied the freezing night. The negative blood moved with the people. It walked out of Africa, or perhaps it was born on the road, and found a home in the high valleys of the Pyrenees, the mist-shrouded coasts of the Atlantic, and the caves of the Dordogne. It was in these isolated pockets, these cul-de-sacs of geography, that the glitch found a foothold. The founder effect, as modern science calls it, took hold. If a small band of 30 people settles a new valley, and the leader carries the negative trait, suddenly that trait is no longer a one-in-a-million anomaly. It becomes a defining characteristic of the clan. It becomes the norm for that specific, isolated family of humanity. But there was a shadow to this light, a cost to this new biological identity. The negative blood was xenophobic in its very chemistry. It was a solitary substance. If it encountered the positive blood, the blood of the ancient majority, it would recognize it not as kin, but as an invader. This set the stage for a tragic biological conflict that would play out in the wombs of mothers for thousands of years. Imagine the confusion of the early healers and shamans. A woman of the negative blood, healthy and strong, finds a mate from a neighboring tribe, a man of the old blood, the positive. Their union is celebrated. Their survival is a victory. But when she carries his child, a child who inherits the father's positive marker, her body reacts with a primitive defensive violence. Her immune system, patrolling the borders of her selfhood, detects the rhesus protein on the baby's blood cells, the protein she lacks, the protein her body views as a foreign germ. And so, the silent glitch turns into a silent weapon. The mother's antibodies rise like a phantom army to attack the life she is nurturing. It is a heartbreak written in the code of life, a cruel tax on the mutation. In the deep past, this meant that the negative lineage struggled to expand. It was kept rare by the very mechanism of its own biology. It could not easily mix with the ocean of the positive. It was forced to remain insular, marrying within its own kind to ensure the survival of its offspring. This biological pressure acted like a crucible, refining and concentrating the trait in specific populations. It explains why, even today, we find the highest concentrations of Rh-negative blood in the fierce, independent peoples of the Basque country or the remote valleys of the Atlas Mountains. It is a legacy of isolation, a memory of a time when the blood itself dictated who could love whom and whose children would survive the first moon of their lives. But let us return to the first carrier, the patient zero of this genetic mystery. They are standing now at the edge of a cliff, looking out over a world that is teeming with life. The sun is setting, casting long shadows across the glacial steppes. They do not know that they are different. They do not know that their blood is a rarity. They feel the same hunger, the same fear, the same awe at the stars as their kin. Yet within them the loom has skipped a stitch, the pattern has broken, and in that break, a new possibility has emerged. The universe has rolled the dice, and the result is a human being who is slightly more alien, slightly more detached from the deep primate ancestry. They are the first step away from the common river, the first trickle of a new stream that will flow through history, carrying with it rumors of blue blood, of royal lineages, of special abilities, and of alien origins. All those myths, all those legends, began here, in the silence of a single cell, with a mutation that made no sound. It was the ultimate invisible event. A protein vanished, a door closed, a wall went up, and humanity became a little more complex, a little more divided, and perhaps a little more resilient. As the twilight deepens into night, the tribe settles down to sleep. The first negative closes their eyes, their chest rising and falling in the rhythm of the deep sleep of the Paleolithic. Beneath their skin, the smooth, stripped cells glide through their veins, unbothered, carrying oxygen to a brain that dreams of the hunt. They are a quiet rebel, indeed. They have seceded from the chemical union of the past. They are the lonely travelers of the genome, carrying a secret that will not be unlocked until the glass lenses of the 20th century finally peer into the crimson darkness. Until then, they are simply survivors. They are the children of the glitch. And as the snow begins to fall, dusting the world in white, we leave them there, safe in the obscurity of deep time, the seed of a mystery planted deep in the frozen earth, waiting for the seasons to turn and the future to arrive. The loom clicks on, weaving the next row, but the pattern has been changed forever. The silence of the silver void has become a permanent part of the human song. The wheel of time turns slowly in the deep past, grinding down mountains and raising new forests from the dust of the old. We drift now into the heart of the Pleistocene, a world defined not by the boundaries of nations, but by the raw elemental forces of ice, wind, and hunger. The landscape is a sprawling, untamed tapestry of gray and green, the steppes stretching out endlessly under a sky that feels lower, heavier, and more immediate than the sky of today. Here the wind carries the biting scent of pine resin and the mineral tang of snow that never quite melts. The silence is profound, broken only by the crack of a glacier calving in the distance or the mournful cry of a wolf pack echoing off the canyon walls. In this unforgiving theater, humanity was small. We were wanderers, huddled figures moving across the vast stage of the earth, wrapped in the skins of the beasts we hunted. We were vulnerable. To look at a human of this era is to see a creature stripped of claws, lacking the crushing jaw of the hyena or the thick hide of the rhinoceros. We were soft, fleshy things, walking upright on the frozen earth, relying on the spark of fire and the sharpness of flint to keep the darkness at bay. But the true danger of the Pleistocene was not always the saber-toothed cat stalking in the tall grass, nor the sudden avalanche in the high passes. The most lethal enemies were invisible. They were the microscopic hunters, the unseen armies that lived in the water, in the soil, and in the blood of the animals we consumed. The world was a theater of microscopic warfare. Every drop of stagnant water was a battlefield. Every bite of raw meat was a potential siege. In this hidden realm, a ceaseless arms race was unfolding between the invader and the host. Parasites, viruses, and protozoa sought to feast upon the warmth of human life, to turn the sanctuary of the cell into a factory for their own replication. And in this ancient war, the blood was the ultimate prize. It was the river of resources, the highway of the body, rich with oxygen and iron. For millions of years, the architecture of the human blood cell had remained largely unchanged. It was a masterpiece of biological engineering, a concave disc designed to flow smoothly through the capillaries, delivering life to the farthest reaches of the body. But on the surface of these cells, for the vast majority of our ancestors, stood the rhesus protein. As we have seen, this protein was an ancient badge of heritage, a link to our primate cousins. But in the ruthless logic of the microscopic predator, it was also something else. It was a foothold. Imagine the rhesus protein as a familiar door handle on the smooth surface of the cell. To a parasite, specifically, the ancient ancestors of Toxoplasma gondii or other primeval pathogens, this protein was a recognition signal. It was a way to grip, to anchor, and to breach the wall. The invaders had evolved alongside us for eons, learning the landscape of our biology. They knew the shape of the handle. They knew how to turn it. For the rhesus-positive majority, the old blood, this vulnerability was the cost of continuity. The very marker that defined them as primates also marked them as targets. But then, we must turn our gaze to the outliers. We must look to those rare individuals, born of the silent glitch, who moved quietly through the migrations of the Stone Age. These were the carriers of the negative blood. As they walked through the tall grasses of the savannah or huddled in the damp caves of the north, their bodies held a secret defiance. When the invisible hunters arrived, perhaps inhaled in the dust of a cave floor or ingested with the meat of a wild horse, they found a landscape that was subtly, crucially different. They approached the red blood cells of these negative humans, seeking the familiar purchase of the antigen, seeking the handle they had used for 1,000,000 years. But for those with the negative blood, the handle was missing. The parasites found no purchase. They slipped against the smooth, unblemished surface of the cell. The ancient enemies of the blood were met, not with a welcoming lock, but with a smooth, impenetrable wall. This was the fortress of the veins. This resistance was the first hint of a hidden superpower. It was not a strength of muscle that could lift heavy stones, nor a sharpness of vision that could spot a gazelle at 3 miles. It was a defensive elegance, a passive resistance written in the very chemistry of the self. It was a shield forged in the absence of a single molecule. Let us follow a hunter from this lineage. Let us call him Kale. He lives in a time when the climate is fluctuating wildly, the interglacial periods bringing wet, humid warmth that breeds pestilence. Kale is a man of the negative blood. He does not know it. He knows only the weight of his spear, the texture of the reindeer hide against his skin, and the gnawing hunger in his belly. He moves with his clan through a marshland teeming with life. The air here buzzes with insects. The water is thick with algae. It is a place of abundance, but also a place of sickness. His clan feasts on the carcass of a fallen elk. The meat is rich, but it carries the cysts of an ancient parasite, a microscopic stowaway waiting to be released. As the clan eats, the parasite enters their bodies. For his brothers and sisters of the positive blood, the invasion begins. The parasite recognizes the terrain. It finds the proteins it expects. It latches on, invades the cells, and begins to influence the host, perhaps causing a lethargy, a fever, or a subtle shift in behavior that makes them slower, less cautious, more prone to falling prey to the great cats, thus completing the parasite's life cycle. But inside Kyle, the story is different. The invader arrives, but the map it carries is wrong. The cells it encounters are like fortress walls without gates. It drifts, confused and unable to anchor. Kyle's immune system, alert and aggressive, spots the intruder exposed in the plasma. Without the hiding place of the red blood cell, the parasite is vulnerable. The white blood cells, the guardians of the deep, swarm the invader. Kyle feels perhaps a slight warmth, a momentary flush of heat as his body fights, but the fever does not take him. He does not wither. While others in his tribe might succumb to the mysterious sleeping sickness or the wasting heat, Kyle remains standing. He watches over the fire while others shiver. He hunts while others rest. He becomes the survivor, the one who lives to pass on his seed, and with it, the silent shield of the negative blood. This is how evolution works in the dark. It is not always the survival of the strongest. Often, it is the survival of the most elusive. The Rh negative trait acted as a form of biological stealth. It made these humans ghosts to the predators of the microscopic realm. As the millennia passed, this advantage became more pronounced. We must remember that the relationship between humans and cats, the primary hosts of toxoplasma, is ancient and complex. Long before we welcomed the domestic cat into our homes to guard our grain stores, we were prey to their larger cousins, the leopard, the saber-tooth, the cave lion. These predators carried parasites that sought to manipulate the behavior of their prey, making them slower, less fearful, easier to catch. There is a fascinating, chilling theory that suggests the rhesus protein might have been a vulnerability exploited by these mind-altering parasites. A human infected might lose their natural fear of the dark, or their reaction time might slow by a fraction of a second, just enough to be caught, just enough to be eaten. But the Rh-negative individual, protected by their fortress veins, retained their sharpness. They retained their fear, which in the Pleistocene was a form of wisdom. They remained alert to the snap of a twig or the scent of musk on the wind. This resistance allowed the carriers of the negative blood to drift into environments where others feared to tread. They could inhabit the damp, parasite-rich lowlands. They could survive closer to the dens of predators. They carried a secret armor that required no maintenance, no mending. It was etched into their being. But let us pause and consider the sensory reality of this existence. Imagine the day in the life of such an ancestor. It is late autumn. The leaves of the birch trees have turned a brilliant, trembling gold. The air is crisp, carrying the scent of impending snow. Our ancestor, a woman this time, let us call her Ilara, is gathering tubers near a riverbank. The mud is cold against her feet. She washes the dirt from the roots in the icy water. She is surrounded by invisible threats. The water teems with protozoa. The dirt under her fingernails holds the eggs of worms. Yet she moves with a vitality that belies the danger. Her skin is clear, her eyes are bright. There is a resilience in her constitution. When she cuts her hand on a sharp stone, the blood that wells up is bright crimson, indistinguishable to the naked eye from any other. She watches it drip onto the black earth, unaware that this fluid is a miracle of exclusion. Later that night, sitting by the fire, she nurses her child. The firelight dances on the cave walls, illuminating the charcoal drawings of bison and horses, prayers made of pigment. She feels a profound connection to her kin, yet there is a subtle separation. She is the one who tends to the sick when the fever comes. She is the one who seems immune to the ailments that periodically sweep through the valley. The tribe looks to her with a mixture of reverence and curiosity. Is she favored by the spirits? Does she have a pact with the wind? They do not know that her pact is with her own biology. Her spirit is the absence of an antigen. Her magic is a missing molecule. This concept of the fortress extends beyond just resistance to parasites. It speaks to a broader theme of biological independence. To lack the rhesus antigen is to be less connected to the biological network of the primate world. It is a step away from the communal table. In a sense, the Rh-negative blood type is a declaration of cellular individuality. It is the body saying, I am a closed system. I am my own universe. And as the ice sheets began to advance again, pushing humanity into smaller and smaller pockets of habitable land, this resilience became crucial. In the crowded caves of the glacial maximum, where hygiene was impossible and humans lived in close quarters with dogs and vermin, disease was the great leveler. A single outbreak could extinguish a lineage forever. In these bottlenecks of history, the Rh-negative trait shone like a beacon in the dark. Those who carried it were the survivors of plagues that remained nameless, epidemics that have left no trace in the fossil record, but surely shaped the genetic destiny of our species. They were the ones who walked out of the caves when the spring finally came, squinting against the glare of the sun on the snow, ready to repopulate the empty world. However, we must also acknowledge the duality. The fortress was strong, but it was lonely. The same immune system that fought off parasites with such vigor was also the system that would turn against a rhesus-positive fetus. The fortress of the veins was so secure that it sometimes mistook its own progeny for an invader. This is the tragic cost of the armor. The shield that protects the mother from the illness of the world also walls her off from the genetic legacy of the majority. It is a poignant image, the mother as a fortress, protecting herself, yet struggling to lower the drawbridge for the new life she carries. It speaks to the incredible tension at the heart of our evolution, the balance between self-preservation and reproduction. The Rh-negative trait sits right at the fulcrum of this balance. It offers a powerful defense, a superpower of immunity, but it demands a high price in return. Let us imagine the scene of a healer in this ancient time, trying to understand this mystery. The healer is an old woman, her face a map of wrinkles, her hands stained with ochre and herbs. She has seen that the women of the clean blood, as she might think of them, the ones who do not get sick, often struggle to bring a second or third child into the world. She sees the sorrow in their eyes. She mixes poultices and chants prayers to the mother goddess. But the biology is relentless. The healer might wonder if the spirits are jealous of these women's health. Why does the fever spare them, only for the cradle to remain empty? It is a question that would remain unanswered for 10,000 years. It adds a layer of melancholy to the narrative of the fortress. The walls are high, yes. The enemies are kept out. But sometimes love is kept out too. And yet, the trait persisted. It did not vanish. This tells us that the protection it offered was worth the cost. In the harsh calculus of the Pleistocene, being immune to a brain-altering parasite or a deadly blood infection was an advantage so profound that it outweighed the risks of childbirth. The fortress stood the test of time. As we move through the era of the Great Hunt, towards the dawn of agriculture, the carriers of the negative blood remained a distinct, resilient minority. They were the Watchers, the ones with the clear heads and the strong constitutions. They were the ones who could endure the stagnant waters of the drying savannas and the flea-ridden furs of the deep winter. We can see them standing on the ridges of the Pyrenees, looking out over the Atlantic, their blood a secret history of resistance. The ocean crashes against the rocks below, a rhythmic pounding that mimics the beat of the heart. These people are the ancestors of the Basques, the Berbers, the Celts, people who would become known for their independence, their unique languages, their resistance to assimilation. Is it poetic license to wonder if their biological independence mirrored their cultural spirit? Or is there a deeper connection between the fortress of the veins and the fortress of the soul? The story of the Rh-negative blood is the story of the survival of the exception. It challenges the idea that evolution always favors the majority. Sometimes it favors the outlier. Sometimes the best way to survive the storm is to be different from the forest. As the sun sets on the Pleistocene, leaving the sky a bruised purple and the first stars pricking the veil of night, we leave our ancestors in their fortress. They huddle together, the firelight flickering in their eyes that have seen the glaciers retreat and the herds vanish. They are the guardians of a genetic anomaly that has become a vital part of the human arsenal. They sleep now, their breathing slow and steady. Deep within them, the blood flows, smooth and stripped, a silent river that refuses to be conquered. The parasites wait in the dark, in the water, in the soil. But the fortress is locked, the handle is missing, and the lineage of the negative lives on, a ghost in the machine of life, ready to face the dawn of the Neolithic world. The silent glitch has become a silent shield. And as history prepares to turn the page, this shield will be tested in new ways as humanity begins to gather in cities, bringing with them new diseases, new dangers, and new mysteries. But for now, the fortress holds, the veins are secure, and the ancient enemies of the blood turn away, defeated by the power of the void. The world did not end with fire, but with a silence so profound, so crushing, that it seemed to swallow the very sound of the wind. Drift with me now, away from the humid cradles of the south, away from the golden savannas where the air shimmered with heat, and move forward in time to an era where the planet held its breath. The great glaciers, ancient and inexorable titans of ice, began their slow, grinding march from the north. They were not merely frozen water. They were continents of cold, miles thick, scraping the belly of the earth, grinding mountains into dust, and turning the vibrant green northern hemisphere into a cathedral of white silence. To understand the journey of the negative blood, we must understand the tyranny of this ice. It was the last glacial maximum, a time when the sky hung low and gray, a heavy curtain drawn across the sun. The oceans receded, locked away in these towering walls of white, exposing the bones of the continental shelves. The landscape was a monochromatic study in survival. Vast, sweeping tundras of lichen and permafrost, broken only by the jagged black teeth of rocky crags that refused to be buried. In this biting cold, where a single mistake meant a quiet sleep from which there was no waking, the small bands of humans carrying the silent glitch found themselves pushed to the very brink of existence. They were refugees of the climate, forced from the open plains where the winds flayed the skin, driven toward the edges of the known world. While others may have retreated south, following the warmth, this specific lineage, the carriers of the empty antigen, the people of the silver void, found themselves cornered by geography and fate. They were pushed into the high peaks and the isolated valleys of what we now call the Franco-Cantabrian region, the rugged spine of the Pyrenees, and the mist-shrouded fastnesses of the Atlantic edge. Here, the air was thin. The light was pale, filtering through a perpetual haze of ice crystals suspended in the atmosphere. To breathe here was a labor. Each inhalation was a sharp intake of needles, a cold that settled deep in the lungs. But it was here, in this fortress of granite and snow, that the negative trait began to transform from a random accident into a defining signature of a people. Imagine the isolation. It is absolute. The great ice sheets acted as a barrier, sealing off these valleys from the rest of humanity. For 10,000 years, a stretch of time so vast it swallows the entire history of civilization twice over, these tribes were cut off. They were an island of humanity in a sea of ice. And in this solitude, the laws of genetics played a strange and intimate game. In the vast oceans of the South, where thousands of humans mingled and traded, a genetic mutation could easily be diluted, washed away like a drop of ink in a rushing river. But here? Here, the river was a cup. The population was small, perhaps only a few hundred souls, huddled in a network of limestone caves. In such a small vessel, every drop of ink changes the color of the water entirely. This is the poetry of the founder effect. If the matriarch of the cave, the woman who knew the secrets of the herbs and the fire, carried the negative blood, then her children carried it. And because there were no strangers arriving from the horizon to dilute it, the trait concentrated. It deepened. It became the norm. The isolation was a crucible. It cooked the impurities out of the lineage, refining this unique biology away from the vast, rhesus-positive oceans of the rest of the species. They became a people of the mist, their biology adapting to the loneliness of the heights. The cold was a witness to their resilience, a silent observer watching as a genetic anomaly became the cornerstone of a new kind of existence. Let us step into the boots, crafted from the thick, shaggy hide of the cave bear, of a man living in this high, frozen world. Let us call him Aaron. It is the deep of winter, a season that spans half the year. Aaron stands at the mouth of a cave in the foothills of the Pyrenees. The world before him is a terrifyingly beautiful expanse of white. The silence is not empty. It is heavy, pressing against his eardrums. He can hear the blood rushing in his own head, a rhythmic swooshing sound. That blood is Rh negative. Aaron adjusts the fur wrap around his shoulders. He is preparing for a hunt. The cold is a physical weight, seeking any gap in his clothing to bite the flesh. But Aaron is adapted. His body is stocky, built to conserve heat. His nasal passages wide to warm the freezing air before it hits his lungs. But it is his blood that interests us. In this high altitude, the oxygen is scarce. The atmosphere is thin. Every movement requires a precise and efficient delivery of fuel to the muscles. There are some paleoanthropologists who dream, in the quiet hours of the night, that perhaps the Rh negative blood, with its lack of surface proteins, possessed a subtle hydrodynamic advantage in these conditions. Perhaps the smoother cells flowed with slightly less resistance through the constricting capillaries of the extremities, keeping the fingers warm enough to notch an arrow, keeping the toes alive in the snow. It is a whisper of a theory, unproven by fossils, but felt in the logic of the narrative. The trait survived here. It flourished here. And nature rarely keeps what is useless in such a desperate hour. Aaron steps out into the snow. The crust crunches loudly under his weight, a sound like breaking glass that travels for miles in the thin air. He is tracking an ibex, a creature of the cliffs that has moved down into the valley seeking exposed moss. As he climbs, his breath plumes before him, a dragon's cloud of steam. He is alone. The solitude of the Ice Age hunter is a profound psychological state. He is separated from his kin by miles of treacherous terrain, and separated from the rest of the human species by a wall of ice. This loneliness is woven into his very being. It is in the way he scans the horizon, expecting nothing but the wind. It is in the way he talks to the spirit of the mountain, because there is no one else to hear him. And deep within him, his genes are recording this isolation. The negative blood is becoming a marker of this specific tribe, a biological password that says, "I belong to the ice. I belong to the silence." As the hours pass and the pale sun begins its low arc across the southern sky, Aaron reaches a ridge. He looks out over a frozen horizon. To the north, the great white wall of the glacier looms, a mile high, glowing with a blue inner light. It is a terrifying god, a destroyer of worlds. But Aaron does not fear it. He respects it. It is his protector. It keeps the others out. It keeps the sickness of the warm lowlands away. It has forced his people to become strong, to become pure in their difference. He spots the ibex. The hunt is short, brutal, and necessary. The smell of fresh blood on the snow is shocking in its vibrancy, a splash of life in a dead world. As he dresses the kill, his hands, stiff with cold, work with an ancient dexterity. The blood that stains his fingers is the same color as the blood of the men on the African Savannah, thousands of miles away. But the code within it is diverging. A cleft is opening in the human family, driven by the wedge of the ice. As Aaron begins the long descent back to the sanctuary of the clan, the sun dips below the peaks. The temperature plummets instantly. The sky turns a deep, bruised purple, and the first stars emerge. Hard, diamond-sharp points of light that seem close enough to touch in the thin atmosphere. He thinks of the fire waiting for him. The cave is not just a shelter, it is a womb. Inside, the air is thick with the smell of burning bone and juniper, the musk of drying furs, and the scent of humanity. Here, the founder effect is not a scientific abstraction. It is a circle of faces around a hearth. There are perhaps 30 people here. They are all related, bound by a tangled web of kinship. They are the pool in which the negative trait is deepening. When Aaron enters, he is greeted by low murmurs. He sees his sister, his mate, his children. In this closed loop, the rhesus D antigen is becoming a memory, a ghost of a protein that fewer and fewer of them possess. The negative is becoming the positive of this micro-world, the standard, the normal. But there is a shadow here, too. The fortress of the veins we spoke of earlier still exacts its toll. In the corner of the cave, a woman weeps softly. She has lost another babe in the first days of life, the infant turning yellow and fading away as her own blood rejected it. The Ice Age does not forgive, and neither does biology. This tragic mechanism keeps the population in check, preventing them from expanding too quickly, forcing them to remain a small, tight-knit unit. It is a harsh pruning, a sacrifice demanded by the blood itself. Yet, those who survive are the strongest of the strong. They are the children of the winter, the ones whose blood has passed the test of both the cold and the womb. They sit by the fire, carving intricate patterns into reindeer antlers, painting the walls with red ochre and charcoal. These are the artists of Lascaux and Altamira, the dreamers who birthed the first great explosion of human creativity. Is it a coincidence that this burst of art and spirit occurred in the very refugia where the negative blood was concentrating? Perhaps the otherness of their biology was mirrored in an otherness of mind. Perhaps the same mutation that stripped the protein from their cells also tweaked the wiring of their neural pathways, making them more prone to seeing patterns in the dark, to hearing the voices of the spirits in the howling wind. We cannot know for sure. The genes tell us the what, but the silence of the cave keeps the why. Generations fade into dust, yet the trait remains. The glaciers grind on, a slow-motion catastrophe that lasts for millennia. The world outside changes. The great herds of mammoth begin to thin. The woolly rhinoceros disappears into the mist. But in the high valleys, the silver thread holds. The lineage remains unbroken. As the ice finally begins to retreat, pulling back its white claws to reveal the scarred and fertile earth of a new Europe, these people will emerge. They will walk down from the mountains, blinking in the new light, carrying with them a genetic legacy that is now firmly established. They are no longer just a family with a mutation. They are a distinct population. They are the Basques, the ancestors of the Atlantic fringe, the carriers of a blood that has been tempered by 5,000 years of solitude. They look out over the thawing valleys with eyes that have seen a different world. They carry within them the memory of the ice, not in their minds, for those memories are lost to myth, but in their veins. The Rh-negative blood is an echo of the ice, a biological souvenir from the time when we lived on the edge of the white abyss. It is a testament to the power of isolation, a reminder that we are shaped as much by where we cannot go as by where we can. And so, as the meltwater begins to roar in the canyons, signaling the end of the long winter, the people of the mist step forward to meet the incoming waves of farmers and migrants from the east. They are different. They feel it. The newcomers feel it. There is a boundary here, invisible but real, written in the scarlet code of life. The ice has gone, but the echo remains, reverberating through the generations, a silent hum in the blood that will last until today. The crucible is cooling, but the metal has been cast. The negative blood is no longer a glitch, it is a heritage. And as the world warms, this heritage will face its next great challenge, the mixing of the peoples, the clash of the bloodlines, and the long, slow journey toward the modern world. The firelight dances low against the limestone walls, casting long, trembling shadows that mimic the ancient spirits of the hunt. Outside, the wind of the late Pleistocene howls with a feral intensity, tearing at the hides stretched across the cave entrance. But here, in the inner sanctum, the air is still, heavy with the metallic tang of blood, the scent of crushed sage, and the thick, humid anticipation of life. We are witnessing a moment that has played out 1 billion times in the dark theater of our history. Yet in this specific lineage, the lineage of the negative blood, it carries a hidden weight, a drama unseen by the eyes but felt in the very fabric of existence. A woman lies upon a bed of furs, her body exhausted from the labor of bringing a new soul into the world. She is of the fortress, a carrier of the silent shield we have spoken of, the woman whose veins refuse the ancient handle of the parasite. She is a survivor, strong and resilient, her immune system a masterpiece of exclusion. But as she holds her newborn infant to her chest, listening to the wet, rhythmic struggle of its first breath, she is unaware that a tragedy has begun to unfold. Not in the room, but in the microscopic rivers of her own being. This gift of the negative blood, this silver void that protected her from the fevers of the marsh and the plagues of the lowlands, came with a haunting shadow. It was a biological toll that felt like a tragic riddle from the gods. To understand it, we must shrink our vision once again, diving past the skin, past the muscle, into the crimson darkness of the placenta, that miraculous temporary organ that serves as the bridge between two worlds. During the long months of gestation, the placenta acts as a diplomat, negotiating the peace between the mother and the child. It allows oxygen and nutrients to pass, but it keeps the bloodstreams largely separate, a biological border patrol ensuring that the two distinct identities do not merge. But birth is a violent, chaotic event. As the walls of the womb contract and the placenta detaches, the border is breached. There is a mixing, a spilling of the child's essence into the mother's circulation. If the father was of the old blood, the rhesus positive, the lineage of the majority, and the child has inherited his mark, then the infant's blood carries the protein. It carries the yes, the signal of the primate, the very antigen that the mother's body lacks. When these positive cells, these tiny invaders bearing the ancient standard, cross the broken bridge and enter the mother's negative bloodstream, a silent alarm begins to ring. The mother's body, sensing an alien presence, the ancient rhesus protein she does not possess, rises up in a misunderstood defense. This is the great evolutionary paradox. The immune system does not know that this foreign protein belongs to a child. It does not understand love or lineage or the tenderness of a mother's touch. It understands only self and not self. It sees the rhesus protein not as a badge of family, but as a germ, a virus, a threat as dangerous as the parasite she so successfully repelled in the swamps. For the first child, this realization usually comes too late to cause harm. The baby is born, cries out, and fills its lungs with the cold air of the cave, safe in its mother's arms. The first breath is a victory. The mixing of the blood happens as they part ways. The child lives. But within the mother, the memory is being written. Her immune system, that vigilant guardian, begins to forge weapons. It creates antibodies, tiny, persistent sentinels designed to hunt down and destroy the rhesus protein. They are the memory cells, and they settle into the marrow of her bones, sleeping, waiting for the enemy to return. This is the cruelty of the design. The first child is the scout that alerts the fortress. The mother is now sensitized. She has become a weapon against her own future. Time flows like water through the valley. Seasons turn. The ice retreats a little further. The herds migrate. The first child grows strong, running on legs that are sturdy and sure. The mother watches him, her heart filled with the fierce, protective love that has driven our species forward. She does not know that deep within her, the dragon is awake. When she falls pregnant again, with another child of the positive blood, the tragedy moves from the prologue to the main act. This second pregnancy feels different. Perhaps she feels a strange fatigue, a heaviness that she cannot explain. Inside, the fortress of the veins has recognized the signature of the fetus. The memory cells wake from their slumber. They see the developing child not as a baby, but as an infection of the rhesus invader. And this time, they do not wait for the border to break. The antibodies she forged years ago are small, sleek, and deadly. They are small enough to cross the placental barrier, slipping through the defenses that usually protect the womb. They enter the bloodstream of the unborn child. They seek out the red blood cells that carry the protein, the very cells the baby needs to transport oxygen, to build its brain, to grow its heart. And they attack. It is a civil war of the most intimate kind. The mother's life force, intended to nourish, becomes an agent of destruction. The baby's body fights back, churning out new blood cells frantically to replace the ones being destroyed. But it is a losing battle. The liver swells, the spleen enlarges, the tiny heart beats faster and faster, trying to pump thin, watery blood through a system that is slowly suffocating. And then comes the birth. In the flickering light of the hearth, the second child arrives. But there is no lusty cry. There is no flushing of the skin with the healthy red of exertion. The baby is pale, or perhaps a strange golden-yellow hue, the color of old parchment. This is the mark of jaundice, the wreckage of destroyed blood cells accumulating in the infant's tissues. The baby struggles to breathe, gasping for air that cannot satisfy its need, because the vehicles of oxygen, the red cells, have been shattered by the mother's own antibodies. The healers of the Stone Age, the wise women who knew the secrets of the roots and the stars, must have looked upon this with a profound and terrifying confusion. Why did the first child live, strong as a bear cub, while the second withered like a frost-bitten flower? Why did the mother, healthy and vibrant, produce a child that seemed to fade into the spirit world before it truly arrived? They had no words for antibodies or antigens. They had only the language of the spirit. Perhaps they whispered of curses. Perhaps they believed a demon had soured the milk, or that the moon had looked too harshly upon the womb. They might have blamed the mother, or the father, or the violation of a taboo. The changeling, they might have called it, a fairy child left in place of the human one, pale and weak and destined to return to the mist. Imagine the grief of a mother in the Neolithic. She holds the limp body of her infant, feeling the warmth slowly ebb away into the cold stone floor. She has done everything right. She has eaten the best meat. She has kept the fire burning. She has prayed to the ancestors. And yet, her own blood has betrayed her. She is the fortress that locked its gates so tight it crushed the guest inside. This heartbreaking silence, this hemolytic disease of the newborn, was the great filter of the negative bloodline. It was a biological checkmate that prevented the trait from spreading too easily. If an Rh-negative woman mated with an Rh-positive man, half their children might die or suffer. In a world without blood transfusions, without the miracle of modern medicine, this was a death sentence for the lineage. It meant that the trait could never truly dominate. It was destined to remain rare, a minority report in the human story. If it became too common, the tragedies would multiply and the population would shrink. But, and here is the wonder of the evolutionary path, it did not disappear. It refused to be extinguished. Why? Why would nature keep a gene that kills babies? The answer lies in the balance, the evolutionary duality we have traced from the beginning. The protection against the parasites, the fortress against the microscopic hunters, was so powerful, so vital for the survival of the mother and her surviving kin, that it outweighed the tragic cost of the lost infants. A woman who survived the plague because of her negative blood could still raise her first healthy child. She could still help raise her sister's children. Her survival was an anchor for the tribe. So the trait remained, caught in a tug-of-war between the advantage of the mother's immunity and the vulnerability of the womb. It hovered at low frequencies, a precious and dangerous flame. It was a paradox carved in bone and written in scarlet. This tension created a specific social dynamic in the deep past. Over generations, communities might have unconsciously recognized that certain lineages shouldn't mix. Or perhaps, purely by the mechanics of survival, the Rh-negative people survived best when they married each other. If an Rh-negative woman mates with an Rh-negative man, there is no protein to fight. There is no war. The blood is the same. The children are born healthy, carrying the negative trait forward. Thus, the biological toll encouraged isolation. It encouraged the people of the mist to stay in their valleys, to marry their cousins, to keep the blood pure not out of pride, but out of a desperate, unspoken need to hear the cry of life at the moment of birth. The tragedy sculpted the population. It reinforced the founder effect. It turned the genetic anomaly into a tribal identity. Let us return to the cave for a moment, to the aftermath of the sorrow. The mother, having buried her child beneath the floor of the shelter as was the custom, returns to the fire. She is changed. There is a melancholy in her, a knowledge of the fragility of life that her positive-blooded sisters cannot fully understand. She has touched the shadow. She is a watcher, not just of the horizon, but of the threshold between life and death. This history of loss is etched into the very frequency of the gene today. Every person with Rh-negative blood walking the streets of the modern world is a descendant of a woman who managed to navigate this minefield. We are the children of the firstborns, or the children of the lucky matches, or the survivors of the milder wars. We carry the memory of those silence births in the rarity of our type. Deep time is not just a record of triumphs, it is a record of scars. And the Rh-negative trait is perhaps the most beautiful and painful scar in the human genome. It represents a subtle shift in the code of life that offered a shield against the outer world while turning the inner world into a battlefield. In the silence of the genome, the struggle continued for thousands of years. Generations of mothers wept in the dark, healers rattled their gourds in vain, and the secret superpower exacted its price. It was a sacrifice demanded by the complexity of life. For the body to learn to distinguish self from other so perfectly that it could defeat a virus, it sometimes had to make the mistake of seeing other in the face of its own child. And yet, the lineage persisted. It walked out of the Ice Age, through the Neolithic Revolution, and into the dawn of recorded history. The first breath remained a moment of supreme suspense, a coin toss by the gods of biology. The survivors of this coin toss became the kings, the explorers, the mystics, and the common laborers of the ancient world, carrying their hidden difference like a lantern under a bushel. As we leave the flickering cave and the grieving mother, we move toward a time when humanity would begin to try to master these forces, when the curse would be viewed not as a riddle of the gods, but as a challenge of the blood. But the echo of that ancient sorrow never truly fades. It is there in the statistics. It is there in the biology. It is a testament to the complex and often cruel beauty of the evolutionary path, that a mutation can be both a savior and a slayer, a fortress and a tomb, a gift and a haunting shadow. The wind dies down outside the cave. The stars wheel overhead, indifferent to the dramas of the blood. But in the quiet breathing of the surviving child, the silver thread endures, winding its way toward the future, carrying the secret story of the struggle for the first breath. The world is waking up. Listen closely, and you can hear the colossal, grinding symphony of change. The great silence of the Ice Age, which held the Northern Hemisphere in a white, frozen trance for 100,000 years, is beginning to fracture. It starts with a single drop of water falling from the lip of a glacier, a diamond of meltwater striking the gray stone beneath. Then another, then 1,000, then a roar. The great ice sheets, those titans that crushed continents and drank the oceans, are retreating. They pull back their white claws, inch by agonizing inch, revealing a landscape that has been scoured, scarred, and fundamentally reborn. We drift now into the early Holocene, a time of mud, of rushing rivers, and of a sun that feels suddenly closer, warmer, more benevolent. The earth that emerges from beneath the ice is raw. It is a world of erratic boulders left stranded in open fields, of deep U-shaped valleys carved by the weight of the glaciers, and of a soil that is rich, dark, and waiting for the first seeds of the new epoch. In this tumultuous time of transition, the human family was on the move. As the ice receded, the vast herds of reindeer and mammoth moved north, chasing the cold they understood. And following them, or perhaps seeking their own sanctuary in the new green world, were the bands of humans carrying the silver thread, the lineage of the Rh-negative blood. But unlike the new waves of migrants who would soon pour in from the warm east, the farmers, the builders of cities, the mixers of blood, this specific lineage did not seek the open plains. They did not settle in the easy, fertile lowlands where the rivers widened and the populations merged. Instead, guided by an instinct as old as their mutation, they sought the edges. They moved toward the jagged spine of the mountains that separate the Iberian Peninsula from the rest of the continent. They moved toward the mist-shrouded coasts of the Atlantic, where the ocean crashes against the cliffs with a violence that mimics the beating of a primal heart. They settled in the rugged folds of the Pyrenees. Visualize this landscape. It is a fortress built by nature. Towering peaks of limestone and granite rise like the teeth of the earth, piercing the clouds. Deep, narrow valleys wind between them, filled with the sound of waterfalls and the scent of pine resin. It is a place of shadows and sudden light, a place where the weather turns in an instant, where the fog rolls in like a living thing to swallow the world. Here, in these high places, the carriers of the negative blood found their sanctuary. They became the guardians of the high passes. We see them now, through the lens of history and genetics, as the ancestors of the Basques, a people who stand as one of Europe's oldest mysteries. But in this moment, they are simply a tribe finding a home in the stone. The isolation here was not a punishment. It was a shield. Just as the lack of the rhesus protein had acted as a shield against the microscopic parasites of the savannah, The mountains now acted as a shield against the dilution of their people. The geography conspired with their biology. The steep cliffs and the treacherous passes discouraged the casual traveler. To enter their world, one had to climb. One had to struggle. And so, the great migrations that would soon sweep across Europe, mixing genes and blurring lines, washed around the base of these mountains like water around a rock, leaving the people on the peaks largely untouched. In this high-altitude incubator, the silent glitch we spoke of, the mutation that removed the protein, was not washed away. Instead, it concentrated. It became like a dye becoming deeper in a smaller bowl of water. The founder effect reigned supreme here. If the patriarchs and matriarchs of these valleys carried the negative blood, then the children of the valleys carried it too. And because they married within their own valleys, crossing the high ridges only to trade or to find a mate from the next clan over, the trait was reinforced. It became a signature of the population. In the rest of the world, the Rh negative blood might be a 1 in 10 occurrence, a rarity floating in the sea of the positive. But here, in the shadow of the peaks, it surged. It became a commonality, a shared bond that linked family to family, village to village. Imagine the sensory reality of their lives in this fortress. The air is thin and crisp, carrying the mineral taste of the stone. The light is different here, sharper, more intense, filtering through the drifting mists. A shepherd stands on a limestone outcrop, wrapped in the rough wool of the semi-wild sheep he tends. He leans on a staff of polished ash wood. His skin is tanned by the mountain's sun, his eyes crinkled against the glare. He looks down into the valley below, where the morning fog is lifting to reveal small circular huts built of stone and turf. Smoke rises from the hearths, blue and lazy against the green of the pasture. He hears the distant sound of a flute carved from the bone of a vulture, a haunting pentatonic melody that echoes off the canyon walls. He speaks to his dog, a lithe, intelligent beast, using words that would sound utterly alien to us, and indeed, utterly alien to the other peoples of ancient Europe. This is the ancestor of Euskara, the Basque language. It is a language isolate, a linguistic island with no known relatives in the Indo-European family that dominates the rest of the continent. Think on this profound duality, a unique blood and a unique tongue, preserved together in the same rocky cradle. The language sounds like the landscape itself. It is full of hard consonants, like the crunch of boots on gravel, K, T, X. It is a language of stone and silence, of wind and water. Linguists tell us it is the oldest living language in Europe, a direct survivor of the speech of the Stone Age hunters. It is a sonic fossil, and it mirrors perfectly the genetic fossil flowing in their veins. Just as their words refused to be replaced by the Latin or Celtic or Germanic tongues that would arrive later, their blood refused to be replaced by the dominant rhesus positive tides. The two are intertwined. The language acted as a cultural barrier, keeping outsiders at bay, while the mountains acted as a physical barrier, and beneath it all, the decree of the cells acted as a biological barrier. Let us return to that haunting concept, the decree of the cells. As we explored in the previous chapter, the mixing of the negative and positive bloods could lead to tragedy in the womb. The curse of the hemolytic disease was a silent enforcer of segregation. Consider a young woman of this mountain tribe. She is strong, her blood pure negative. She meets a trader from the lowlands, a man of the new farming people who have brought wheat and pottery from the east. He is of the positive blood. If she goes with him, if she bears his children, she faces the heartbreak of the yellow sickness, the silence in the cradle. But if she stays in the high passes, if she takes a mate from her own kin, from the men who carry the same silent void in their veins, her children live. They thrive. Over centuries, this biological reality shapes the culture. It creates a deep, unspoken preference for one's own kind. It is not necessarily born of prejudice, but of survival. The blood protects itself. The lineage remains pure because, quite simply, the pure lineages are the ones that produce the most surviving grandchildren. The negative spark is kept alive by the very danger it creates. And so, they became a people apart, not necessarily by a conscious choice of mind, but by the subtle, relentless pressure of their own biology. They became the old Europeans, the last stand of the hunter-gatherer genetics in a world that was rapidly turning toward the plow and the city. But let us not paint them as tragic figures. They were masters of their domain. They knew the secrets of the high meadows, the medicinal herbs that grew only in the shade of the granite walls. They knew the migration paths of the birds and the spawning cycles of the salmon in the Atlantic rivers. Life in the high passes was a life of intense physical engagement with the world. Feel the texture of the day-to-day existence. It is the rough scrape of limestone against the palm as one climbs to a summer pasture. It is the smell of lanolin from the sheep, the sharp tang of fermenting cider, the warmth of a fire built from slow-burning oak. It is the sound of the chalaparta, ancient wooden boards struck with sticks, creating a rhythm that mimics the galloping of horses, a communication system used to send messages across the deep valleys. They were the guardians, not just of a blood type, but of a way of being. They represented the power of the fringe. In evolutionary theory, the center of a species' range is where the most mixing happens, where traits are homogenized. But the fringe, the edge, that is where the ancient traits survive. That is where the oddities, the relics, and the unique adaptations find a foothold. The Pyrenees and the Atlantic coast were the ultimate fringe. Here, the ocean met the earth, and the earth met the sky. In this liminal space, the Rh negative blood found its stronghold. We must also consider the spiritual life of these people. While the rest of Europe began to build temples to sky gods and solar deities, the people of the high passes kept their eyes turned toward the earth. Their mythology, which survives in fragments today, speaks of a great goddess, Marie, who lives deep within the caves of the mountains. Is it a coincidence that the people with the earth blood, the blood that lacks the primate protein, the blood that is stripped down to its elemental base, worshipped a goddess of the caves? The connection between the womb of the earth and the womb of the mother is palpable here. They buried their dead in the crouching position, returning them to the fetal state, placing them in stone circles called haraspil that dot the misty ridges like crowns of gray teeth. Stand inside one of these stone circles at dusk. The mist is swirling around your ankles. The silence is profound, heavy with the weight of centuries. You are standing in the presence of the ancestors. These stones mark the territory of the negative blood. They are the physical manifestations of the boundary line. Here we live, the stones say. Here we remember. As the millennia passed, the world below changed. The Bronze Age arrived, bringing metal and war. The Iron Age followed. The legions of Rome marched north, their sandals slapping against the stone roads they built to conquer the world. But the Romans found the Basque country difficult, the terrain punishing, and the people fierce. They largely bypassed the high valleys or made loose treaties that left the locals to their own devices. The guardians watched the empires rise and fall from their high perches. They saw the eagles of Rome, the banners of the Visigoths, the crescents of the Moors. They traded, they adapted, they learned ironworking and became masters of it, but they never lost their essential core. The silver thread remained unbroken. The Rh negative trait, sheltered in these mountains, became a reservoir for the rest of humanity. It is from these populations that the trait would eventually diffuse outwards again, carried by sailors and explorers who left the Bay of Biscay to travel the globe. But that is a later chapter. For now, in the deep time of the post-Ice Age, they are the keepers of the flame. They are the outliers. In statistics, an outlier is a data point that sits far away from the rest, often discarded as an error. But in the story of life, the outlier is the most precious thing of all. It is the backup plan. It is the alternative strategy. The Rh-negative people were the human backup plan, a variation kept in reserve in the high pocket of the mountains. Their presence was a testament to the diversity of the human spirit mirrored in the diversity of the human heart. If humanity were all the same, if every blood cell carried the same protein, we would be vulnerable. A single pathogen, a single lock-and-key virus, could wipe us all out. But because of the silent glitch, because of the guardians of the high passes, there was always a difference. There was always a door that didn't open, a handle that wasn't there. As night falls over the Pyrenees in the year 4000 BCE, the fires are lit in the stone huts. The wind picks up, whistling through the crags. Inside, a grandmother tells a story in a language that predates the pyramids. She holds a child on her lap, a child with the negative blood. She runs her hand over the child's hair, feeling the pulse of the fontanelle. She does not know about proteins or antigens. She does not know that her people are a genetic curiosity to the future. She knows only that they are the people of the mountains, the survivors of the ice, the ones who stayed when others left. She knows that their blood is strong, even if it is sometimes sorrowful. And as the child drifts to sleep, the blood flows through its veins, a silent, silver river that has traveled from the African Savannah, through the bottleneck of the Ice Age, and found a home here, in the roof of the world. The guardian is at her post. The memory is safe. The scarred and fertile earth continues to turn. The seasons cycle, and the thread winds on, waiting for the moment when it will be woven back into the wider tapestry of the world, carrying its secret message of survival to the modern day. The high passes keep their secret well, carved in the granite and in the gene, a monument to the stubborn, beautiful persistence of the exception. The world of the post-glacial dawn was a place of overwhelming sensory density, a cathedral of living wood and breathing leaf that stretched from the Atlantic coast to the Urals. As the ice retreated, it left behind not just a barren scar, but a canvas that was quickly consumed by the voracious appetite of the great forests. Imagine, if you will, standing in the heart of this primeval woodland, a time when the canopy was so thick it swallowed the sun, creating a perpetual emerald twilight below. The air here is not merely gas. It is a soup of spores, pollens, and the musk of 1,000 unseen creatures. It is a world where silence is never truly silent, but a tapestry of rustles, snaps, and the low, vibrational hum of life pushing against the constraints of the earth. In this dense and labyrinthine world, humanity was no longer the master of the open plains, seeing for miles in every direction. We had become forest dwellers, hemmed in by the vertical architecture of oak, elm, and lime. Vision, our primary sense on the savannah, was suddenly limited. The horizon was gone, replaced by a wall of green and gray. In this new, claustrophobic reality, where a predator could vanish into the dappled shade just 10 paces away, the survival of the tribe began to depend on a different kind of seeing. It depended on the ability to perceive the unseen, to read the invisible script written on the wind and in the electromagnetic quiet of the glade. And it is here, in the shadowed understory of the Mesolithic, that the whisper of a legend begins. A recurring whisper that clings to the history of the Rh-negative blood like moss to an ancient stone. It is the story of the sensitives, the individuals whose nervous systems were tuned to a different frequency, vibrating with a subtle electric awareness that bordered on the supernatural. Let us strip away the modern myths of psychic powers and crystal gazers and look instead at the biology of survival. We must treat this sensitivity not as magic, but as a byproduct of a biology that had spent eons on the periphery. We have already established that the carriers of the negative blood were the outliers, the ones whose immune systems stood apart, the ones whose very cells refused the common handle of the primate order. It is a fundamental principle of nature that when one door is closed, another is often forced open. If the body is chemically distinct, operating with a different set of keys, is it so far-fetched to imagine that the nervous system, that great electrical grid of the body, might also hum with a slightly different voltage? Imagine a woman of this lineage. Let us call her Elara. She sits by the embers of a dying fire, the rest of her clan asleep in the warm animal pile of communal rest. The forest around them is vast and indifferent. To the others, the night is simply dark. To Elara, the night is loud. Her biology, stripped of the rhesus protein, possesses a nervous architecture that is arguably more porous, more open to the influx of the world. While her kin sleep the heavy, dreamless sleep of the contented, Elara is awake. She feels the shift in the barometric pressure long before the clouds gather. It starts as a tightness in her temples, a prickling sensation along the back of her arms. The air grows heavy, charged with the static electricity of a storm that is still 50 miles away. The ions in the atmosphere are shifting, the positive and negative charges aligning for the coming release, and Elara's body, perhaps lacking the insulation of the common blood type, acts as a lightning rod for this data. She is a human barometer. In the stillness of the primeval forest, she stands up, moving silently away from the fire. She can smell the ozone on the wind before the wind even blows. She can hear the silence of the birds, the sudden, terrifying cessation of song that indicates the pressure is dropping. To the others, the storm will be a surprise, a sudden crash of thunder waking them in terror. To Elara, it is an arrival she has been expecting for hours. She begins to secure the hides, to move the dried meat to shelter, to wake the elders with a gentle touch. "The sky is turning," she whispers. And when the first fat drops of rain begin to hiss into the fire, the tribe looks at her not with suspicion, but with a quiet awe. She is the one who knows. She is the bridge between the tribe and the elements. This heightened awareness was a day-in-the-life reality for the ancestor with the negative blood. It was not a choice. It was a constant, low-level bombardment of information. Modern psychology might call this sensory processing sensitivity or label such a person a highly sensitive person, HSP. But in the context of the Stone Age, it was a survival weapon. Consider the role of the lookout. In every social species, from meerkats to wolves to humans, there is a need for sentinels, individuals who remain vigilant while the others feed or rest. The Rh-negative individual, with their potential predisposition to a higher state of alertness, driven perhaps by a slightly different regulation of cortisol or adrenaline, was naturally slotted into this role. They were the ones who could not relax, the ones who found the chaotic noise of the daytime overwhelming, but who found their purpose in the quiet vigilance of the twilight. Let us walk with Elara on a gathering trip the next day. The storm has passed, and the forest is dripping, the sunlight shattering through the canopy in blinding shafts. The tribe moves through the undergrowth, laughing, talking, their footsteps heavy on the wet leaves. But Elara moves on the edge of the group. Her eyes are constantly darting, her ears swiveling to catch the snap of a twig that doesn't fit the rhythm of the wind. She stops. The hair on her arms stands up. It is not a sound she has heard, nor a scent she has smelled. It is a feeling, a gut instinct that hits her with the force of a physical blow. We often dismiss the gut feeling as superstition, but in the biography of the body, the gut is the second brain, lined with millions of neurons. It is possible that Elara's system is picking up on micro-cues that her conscious mind hasn't processed yet. A sudden silence in the cricket song, a shift in the wind direction, the subtle scent of fear pheromones from a nearby squirrel. Or perhaps, and here we tread into the beautiful mystery of the electric pulse of the earth, she is sensing the electromagnetic field of a living thing. We know that sharks can sense the heartbeat of a fish through the water. We know that birds navigate by the magnetic lines of the globe. Is it possible that in these rare humans, some ancient vestigial capacity for magnetoreception remained active or was even amplified by the unique chemistry of their blood? Blood is, after all, rich in iron. It is a ferrous fluid, a river of metal responding to the magnetic pull of the planet. If the surface of the cell is different, smoother, lacking the rhesus complex, does the iron sing a different song? Does the blood flow with less resistance, creating a cleaner circuit for the electrical signals of the nervous system? Alara freezes. She signals to the others to stop. They trust her silence. A moment later, the brush parts, and a cave bear, massive and silent as a shadow, crosses their path 50 yards ahead. If they had continued, they would have walked into its jaws. The bear vanishes. The tribe breathes again. Alara exhales, the adrenaline shaking her hands. She did not see the bear. She felt the disturbance in the field. She sensed the presence of the predator before it broke cover. This gift of perception allowed them to navigate the complexities of a changing world with a strange, intuitive grace. But we must also speak of the cost. Evolution rarely gives with both hands. It trades. The price of being a finely tuned instrument is that the world is often too loud, too bright, too intense. For the Rh-negative ancestor, the sensory input could be overwhelming. The scratch of rough wool against the skin might feel like sandpaper. The sound of a child crying might pierce the ear like a needle. The evolutionary duality here is the balance between awareness and anxiety. To be the lookout is to be perpetually anxious. It is to live with a nervous system that refuses to settle, that is constantly scanning the horizon for the next threat. While the rhesus-positive majority might have possessed a biological buffer, a capacity to filter out the noise and focus on the task at hand, the negative individual took it all in. They were the sponges of the emotional and physical environment. This likely made them the healers, the shamans, the storytellers, the ones who could read the micro-expressions on a face and know that a kin member was sick before they coughed, or who could sense the tension between two rivals before the first blow was struck. In the deep time of the Paleolithic, this sensitivity was a form of social glue. The tribe needed the dreamers. They needed the ones who felt the hum of the world in their very bones. These individuals became the interpreters of reality. When the tribe sat around the fire at night, discussing where the herds might have gone, the rhesus-negative hunter might speak up, not with logic, but with a knowing. "The herds are north," he might say. "The wind feels like them." And more often than not, he would be right. This intuition was not magic. It was pattern recognition operating at a subconscious speed. It was the brain processing environmental data, humidity, temperature, the angle of the light, the smell of the soil, so fast that the conscious mind experienced it as a hunch. The negative biology, operating on the periphery of the genetic norm, had simply retained a sharper, wilder connection to these primal data streams. As the millennia turned and humanity began to settle into the Neolithic, building fences and walls, this trait became even more complex. In the crowded environment of a village, the sensitive would struggle. The emotions of others would press in on them. The noise of the settlement would be a constant abrasion. We can imagine them retreating to the edges, becoming the hermits, the wise women living in the hut at the edge of the woods, the ones visited by kings for advice but unable to live within the city walls. They carried the weight of their unique chemistry like a lantern in the dark. A lantern illuminates the path for others, but the bearer of the lantern is the one who must walk into the darkness first. They were the pioneers of the inner world, just as they were the survivors of the outer world. Let us pause to consider the physical sensation of this electric pulse. Imagine lying on the earth in a time before rubber soles insulated us from the ground. The Rh-negative ancestor lies with their back against the moss. They can feel the vibrations of footsteps a mile away. They can feel the deep, thrumming resonance of the earth itself, the Schumann resonance, the heartbeat of the planet. To them, The Earth is not dead rock. It is a living, breathing entity. This connection likely birthed the first spiritualities. If you feel the Earth responding to you, you believe it has a soul. If you feel the trees watching you, you believe they are spirits. The animistic worldview of our ancestors may well have been driven by the heightened neurobiology of these few. They were the neurodivergent of the Stone Age, and their divergence was the seed of our wonder. But there is a melancholy here, too. To be so open is to be vulnerable. To feel the storm before it arrives is to suffer the storm twice, once in anticipation and once in reality. The Rh-negative ancestors carried the burden of the future. They were the worriers of the species. While the others feasted, they watched the shadows. While the others slept, they watched the stars. This insomnia, this restless vigilance, is a trait that many with the blood type still report today. It is an ancient memory carved in the neural pathways. It is the body remembering the time when sleep was dangerous, when the fire had to be tended, when the tiger was waiting. The silent glitch in the blood had created a loudness in the mind. A volume knob turned up to 11. And yet, without this sensitivity, would we have survived? Would we have noticed the changing seasons in time to store grain? Would we have sensed the predators in time to run? Would we have developed the empathy that allows us to care for the sick and the weak? The sensitivity to the unseen was a quiet companion to their blood. It was a trade-off. Nature took away the protein, took away the easy belonging to the primate molecular club, but in exchange, it gave a set of eyes that could see in the dark. It gave a nervous system that acted as a radar for the entire tribe. As the sun sets on the Mesolithic forest, casting long skeletal shadows through the trees, Ilara stands guard. She is tired. Her head aches with the pressure of the coming rain. Her skin feels too tight. But she does not look away. She is the guardian. She is the sensor. She is the lantern. And as long as she is awake, the tribe is safe. The blood that flows through her veins is different, cooler perhaps, more aloof, stripped of the ancient markers. But it is this very difference that keeps the fire of humanity burning through the long, dark night of our origins. The mystery of the first breath and the fortress of the veins is matched only by the mystery of the open mind, and as we move forward in our story, leaving the forests for the first cities, we will see how this sensitivity navigated the chaos of civilization. But for now, we leave them in the silence of the trees, listening to the music of the earth that only they can hear, a melody written in the key of the negative. The great wheel of the ages turns, grinding slowly against the bedrock of history. And as it turns, the silence of the primeval world begins to fracture. We leave behind the stillness of the high passes and the frozen sanctuaries of the Pyrenees, drifting forward into a time when the earth itself seemed to quicken. The glaciers have long since retreated to the poles, leaving behind a scarred and fertile continent that is rapidly turning green with the chaotic abundance of the Holocene. The deep, rhythmic slumber of the Stone Age is ending, replaced by the restless stirring of a new era, the age of metal, of sail, and of the first great roads carving their way through the wilderness. It is in this awakening world that the silver thread of the negative blood begins to uncoil. For thousands of years, it had been a prisoner of geography, held safe in the granite cradle of the mountains, a secret shared by a few isolated clans. But biology, like water, refuses to be contained forever. Just as a mountain lake eventually spills over its banks to form a river, the unique genetics of the guardian people began to trickle down from the heights. The thread began to weave its way into the broader, more complex tapestry of the expanding human family. Imagine the first departures. They were not great armies marching to war, nor were they mass migrations of desperate refugees. They were subtle, almost invisible movements. A young man, perhaps possessed of that sensitivity to the unseen we spoke of, feeling the pull of a horizon he had never seen, packing his few belongings, a flint knife, a bag of dried meat, a talisman of river stone, and walking down the goat paths toward the unknown. A woman, traded in marriage to a clan in the valley below to seal a peace treaty, carrying within her womb the silent legacy of the negative blood. These were the vectors of the silver thread. As they moved, the trait moved with them, a stowaway in the blood, traveling with the restless feet of explorers, warriors, and traders. It was a time when the human world was expanding, when the isolated pockets of humanity were beginning to touch, to trade, and to bleed into one another. The journey of the negative blood is a ghost story written on the map of Europe and the Mediterranean. It moved first along the Atlantic facade, that rugged, mist-shrouded coastline that stretches from northern Spain up to the British Isles. This was the Atlantic Arc, a highway of the sea long before the Roman roads were paved. We can picture the boats, curras made of stretched animal skins over wooden frames, smelling of tar and brine, bobbing on the gray swells of the Bay of Biscay. The sailors who manned these vessels were the descendants of the ice refuge people. They had the sea in their eyes and the negative blood in their veins. As they rowed north, fighting the currents, they carried their genetic cargo to the shores of Ireland, to the rocky coasts of Cornwall, and to the Hebrides. This explains the haunting echo of the trait we find today in the Celtic fringe, the high prevalence of Rh negative blood in the Irish, the Scots, and the Welsh. It is a biological memory of these first maritime pioneers, the men and women who looked at the gray ocean and saw a road rather than a wall. Feel the spray of the salt water on their faces, taste the cold air. These were not conquerors, they were connectors. They planted the seed of the anomaly in the dark soil of the north, where it would take root and flourish in the isolation of the islands, mirroring the isolation of the mountains they had left behind. But the thread did not only travel north, it also turned south and east, drawn by the warmth and the light of the wine-dark seas. The Mediterranean was waking up. The great civilizations of the Bronze Age were beginning to rise. The Minoans on Crete, with their bull dancers and labyrinthine palaces, the Phoenicians, the masters of the purple dye and the alphabet, and later, the Greeks, the dreamers of logic and marble. Into this bustling, sun-drenched arena, the negative blood entered as a quiet stranger. It climbed the terraced hills of Italy and walked the dusty streets of ancient Anatolia. It was always a minority, a subtle variation in the human chorus. In a marketplace in Tyre, amidst the shouting of merchants and the smell of cedar and spices, a trader from the west might clasp hands with a merchant from the east. In that handshake there was no transfer of blood, but in the marriages that followed, in the mingling of families, the trait slipped into the gene pool of the classical world. It was like a rare mineral found in scattered pockets of the earth. You might find it in the veins of a priestess in Delphi, inhaling the vapors of the earth and speaking in riddles, her heightened sensitivity a gift of her negative heritage. You might find it in a Spartan warrior, standing shield to shield with his brothers, his body reacting to wounds with a strange resilience, or perhaps succumbing to a fever that others shook off, the duality of the trait playing out on the battlefield. The blood was a global wanderer, a traveler that refused to be washed away by the tides of intermingling. And nowhere is this more poetic than in the figure of the desert nomad. Cross the Mediterranean to the shores of North Africa, to the jagged peaks of the Atlas Mountains and the vast, singing silence of the Sahara. Here we find the Berbers, the Amazigh, the free people. They are an ancient lineage, and they carry the Rh negative trait with a frequency that rivals the Basques. How did it get here? Was it a migration from Europe across the Straits of Gibraltar in the deep past? Or was it a remnant of a much older population that spanned both continents before the seas rose? Picture the nomad tent, woven from goat hair, pitched in the lee of a great dune. The wind hisses through the sand, a sound like silk rubbing against silk. Inside, a family gathers for tea, the mint sweet and hot. They are people of the horizon, masters of a landscape that kills the unprepared. The negative blood here is not a curse, it is a badge of endurance. It survives in the high Altus, just as it survived in the Pyrenees. There is a profound resonance between these two places, the snowy peaks of Europe and the burning peaks of Africa. Both are refuges. Both are places where the people of the edge could maintain their identity against the sweeping empires of the plains. The nomad carries the trait in his saddlebag, so to speak, preserving it in the deep silence of the desert. When he looks up at the stars, stars that burn with a fierce, unwavering clarity in the dry air, he is looking at the same stars his distant cousins in the north are watching. The blood binds them across the empty miles, a silver thread stretched tight over the curvature of the earth. And then, there is the archetype of the Celtic queen. As the trait moved into the mainstream of history, it occasionally flared up in individuals of immense power and charisma. We drift north again, to the dripping forests of Britain and Gaul, where the Roman legions are beginning to encroach. The Romans represent the force of homogenization, the positive force of empire, order, and uniformity. They bring straight roads, standardized laws, and a pantheon of gods who demand obedience. Opposing them are the tribes of the negative blood, the Celts, the rebels, and leading them, we often find women of extraordinary stature. Think of Boudica or Cartimandua. While we cannot know their blood type for certain without a time machine, the biography of the body suggests a connection. The fierce independence, the intuitive strategy, the almost supernatural ability to rally their people. Does this not echo the guardian spirit we traced in the mountains? Imagine a queen of the Iceni standing on a chariot, her hair a mane of red gold flying in the wind. She screams defiance at the disciplined ranks of the Roman legion. Her blood is boiling. It is the blood of the anomaly, the blood that refuses to conform. She is fighting not just for land, but for the right to be different, the right to remain an outlier. In her veins, the silent glitch is screaming. It is a biological declaration of independence. Even if she falls, even if the legions march over her body, the blood survives, it hides, it goes underground. This is the secret genius of the negative trait, its recessive nature. It is a master of disguise. For the trait to manifest, for a person to be truly Rh negative, they must inherit the empty code from both parents. But if they inherit it from only one, then they are a carrier. They appear positive. They have the protein. They pass the tests of the surface. But deep in their genome, the silver thread is wound tight, waiting. This allowed the trait to travel undetected through populations that might otherwise have been hostile to it. It was a stowaway in the most literal sense. A Roman soldier might carry the gene, unknowingly inherited from a Gallic mother, and take it to the frontiers of Syria. A Viking raider might carry it from Dublin to the Black Sea. The gene moved under the radar, skipping generations, surfacing only when two carriers found each other in the chaos of the world. It was a message in a bottle, tossed into the ocean of humanity, washing up on distant shores centuries later. Every time a child was born with this blood, visible only by the reaction of the mother's body, or perhaps by that subtle shimmer of sensitivity, the ancient story of the glitch was told once again. It was a silent reminder that humanity is not a single note. We are not a monolith. We are a complex and unfolding symphony full of dissonant chords and unexpected harmonies. The migration of the silver thread challenges the idea of a simple human history. It suggests that there are hidden maps, invisible networks of kinship that cut across borders and languages. A Basque shepherd, a Scottish fisherman, and a Berber nomad might share a closer biological bond than they do with their own neighbors. They are members of the secret society of the negative, a brotherhood and sisterhood of the blood that has no flag and no name. As the Middle Ages dawn, and the world becomes a place of cathedrals and castles, the thread continues to weave. It is there in the royal houses of Europe where the blue blood myth takes hold. Perhaps a misunderstanding of the visible veins of the pale-skinned nobility, or perhaps a folk memory of the rare blood that required such careful lineage to preserve. It is there in the persecutions of the witches and the wise women, many of whom, with their herbal knowledge and their heightened sensitivity, may have been carriers of the ancient trait, misunderstood by a fearful world. The thread is a witness to the Crusades, to the Silk Road, to the Great Plagues. When the Black Death sweeps across Europe, does the negative blood offer a different kind of resistance? Some modern theories suggest that the Rh-negative blood might interact differently with certain viruses and bacteria. Perhaps, in the terrifying lottery of the plague, the fortress of the veins once again provided a slight edge, a fractional increase in the chance of survival, allowing the thread to endure when whole family lines were extinguished. We see the thread shimmering in the light of the Renaissance, moving with the explorers to the New World. It crosses the Atlantic again, this time not in skin boats, but in galleons. It arrives in the Americas, a biological import that will mix with the indigenous peoples, creating new and complex patterns of inheritance. It is a global wanderer indeed, but through it all, it remains rare. It never dominates. It remains the seasoning in the stew, the silver filament in the wool. It is a testament to our capacity for change, a legacy of the moments when we stepped off the beaten path. It reminds us that evolution is not a straight line toward perfection, but a branching tree of possibilities. As we stand at the threshold of the modern era, where science will finally give a name to this mystery, we must look back with gratitude at the journey of this blood. It has walked the ice, climbed the mountains, sailed the seas, and crossed the deserts. It has been a king and a slave, a warrior and a healer. It is the blood of the rebel and the blood of the survivor. The tapestry of the human family is vast and colorful, but without the silver thread, it would lack a certain luster. It would lack the element of the unknown. And as the night deepens and the world sleeps, the thread vibrates quietly in the veins of millions, a silent song of history that refuses to end. The migration is not over. The thread is still weaving, still moving, still finding new ways to tell the story of the glitch that saved us. And so, the stowaway sails on, carried in the hull of the human vessel, a precious cargo of difference in a world that strives for sameness. The wheel of history turns, heavy and creaking, moving us away from the wind-swept ridges of the Pyrenees and the salt-sprayed decks of the early voyagers, depositing us into a world of shadows, stone, and parchment. We enter the long, dreamlike corridor of human history that stretches from the fall of Rome to the first stirrings of the scientific revolution. It is a time when the world was read not as a mechanism of gears and atoms, but as a book of symbols, a grand, mystical text written by the hand of the divine. In this era, the forests were still deep and dark, populated by the creatures of folklore, and the cities were mazes of timber and winding streets, smelling of wood smoke, incense, and the unwashed humanity of the Middle Ages. Here, in the centuries before the glass lens of the microscope would finally tear the veil from the invisible world, the blood was not merely a biological fluid. It was a sacred substance. It was the prima materia of life itself, the crimson gold that held the soul tethered to the bone. To the ancients, and to the scholars huddled in the scriptoriums of medieval Europe, blood was the carrier of destiny. It was the ink in which the history of a lineage was written. And though they possessed no language for proteins, no concept of antigens or genetic markers, the people of this era possessed a profound, intuitive sensitivity to the differences that flowed within the veins of men and women. They sensed, with a pre-scientific instinct, that not all blood was the same. They felt, in the way a dowser feels water beneath the earth, that some lineages possessed a strange and potent quality, a vibration of difference that set them apart from the common tide of humanity. This intuition gave birth to myths and metaphors that we still use today, fossils of a biological truth buried in the sediment of language. Consider the phrase blue blood. We hear it now and think of aristocracy, of privilege, of the gilded halls of palaces. But let us strip away the social accumulation and look at the physical reality of the body in this era. In the sun-drenched lands of Spain, during the long centuries of the Reconquista, there existed a sharp division between the populations. There were the Moors, the people of the south, whose skin had been kissed by the African sun, and there were the old families of the north, the Visigoths, the descendants of the mountain tribes, the lineages that had remained isolated in the high, cold places we spoke of earlier. These northern families, these hidalgos, often possessed skin as pale as alabaster, a transparency that was almost ghostly. And beneath this translucent parchment of the skin, the veins stood out in stark, vivid relief. They traced a map of azure rivers along the wrists and temples. To the observer in the medieval court, this was the sangre azul, the blue blood. It was a visual marker of a specific heritage, a claim to an ancient, unmixed ancestry. But is it not a fascinating echo of our story that these specific populations, the Basques, the northern Iberians, are the very epicenter of the Rh negative trait? The blue blood was not just a poetic description of fair skin, it was the visible signature of the fortress of the veins. It was the outer manifestation of the people of the mist who had guarded the silver thread through the Ice Age. The nobility's obsession with pure blood, with marrying only within their own narrow circles, was a social enactment of a biological imperative. Without knowing why, they were preserving the recessive gene. They were maintaining the glitch by ensuring that the carrier mated with the carrier. In the candle-lit chambers of the aristocracy, the blue blood became a cult of exclusivity. But beneath the velvet and the gold, the biology was working its ancient, ruthless logic. The inbreeding that preserved the Rh negative trait also concentrated it, turning the castles of Europe into laboratories of genetics. The fortress was now made of stone and law, but the fortress of the veins remained the true guardian. Let us drift now from the court to the laboratory. Imagine a room in Prague or Toledo, late in the 16th century. The air is thick with the acrid smell of sulfur, melting wax, and dried herbs. Shelves line the walls, crowded with glass alembics, retorts, and dusty volumes bound in leather. This is the domain of the alchemist, the seeker of the philosopher's stone, the man who believes that the physical world can be transmuted into the spiritual through the fire of the crucible. The alchemist stands over a workbench, his face illuminated by the glow of a furnace. He is studying a vial of blood. To the modern eye, it is just plasma and hemoglobin, but to him, it is a microcosm of the universe. He believes that blood contains the vital heat, the spark of God. He is searching for the secret of immortality, the elixir of life. In his experiments, he may have noticed anomalies. Perhaps when mixing the blood of different subjects for his arcane medicines, he observed strange reactions, clumping, separations, a refusal of the fluids to merge. We know now this was the antigen-antibody reaction, the war between the positive and the negative. But to the alchemist, seeing the blood curdle in the glass, it must have looked like a judgment from nature. It must have confirmed his belief that there were different types of souls, different elemental compositions within the human form. The Rh negative blood, with its lack of the monkey protein, its stripped-down purity, might have been seen by these early mystics as a more refined substance. In the language of alchemy, the goal was to separate the gross matter from the subtle spirit. The rhesus protein is, in a sense, the gross matter, the biological connection to the earth, to the animal past. The negative blood, lacking this connection, is the subtle spirit. It is the alchemical gold, rare, refined, and singular. Did they whisper, in the dead of night, that those with this blood were star-born? There is a persistent thread in the tapestry of occult history that links certain bloodlines to the heavens. While we must remain grounded in the anthropology of the body, we cannot ignore the stories the body tells about itself. The carriers of the negative trait, often possessing that sensitivity to the unseen we explored, the lookouts of the tribe, would naturally have been drawn to the roles of the mystic, the seer, and the alchemist. They were the ones who felt the hum of the universe. It is no coincidence that the legends of the Grail bloodline, the Sangreal, or royal blood, emerge from the very regions where the Rh negative trait is most common. The legend speaks of a sacred vessel containing the blood of the divine. But what if the vessel is not a cup, but the body itself? What if the Grail is the genetic lineage that has carried the negative spark through the dark corridors of history? The metaphor of the Grail is a story of a hidden treasure that can heal the land, a secret that must be guarded by a select few. This mirrors perfectly the biological reality of the Rh negative gene. It is a hidden treasure of the genome, a recessive jewel that must be guarded by the mating of carrier with carrier to survive. It is a secret reservoir of possibility. But the alchemist's laboratory was also a place of shadow. We must remember the haunting shadow of the lineage, the tragedy of the womb. The alchemist's crimson gold came with a terrible price. In the royal houses of Europe, where the blue blood was most jealously guarded, the curse of the antibody often struck. Picture a king, powerful and desperate, kneeling in a private chapel. The stained glass casts a kaleidoscope of color onto the stone floor. He prays for an heir, his queen, a woman of the highest nobility, perhaps a carrier of the negative blood like himself, or perhaps a negative mother carrying a positive child, has given birth to another stillborn son. The infant was yellowed, frail, the life choked out of it by the invisible war. The king does not know about the rhesus factor. He knows only that his lineage is dying. He blames the stars. He blames witchcraft. He blames the sins of his father. He calls in the alchemists and the court physicians. They bleed the queen. They give her potions of crushed pearls and mercury. They consult the zodiac. But the biology is deaf to their pleas. This is the sorrow of the kings. The very purity they sought, the very exclusivity of their bloodlines, became the engine of their sorrow. The fortress of the veins protected the queen from the plague, but it locked the gate against her own progeny. The crimson gold was cold to the touch. This duality, the sacredness of the blood and the tragedy of the birth, created a powerful mystique around these lineages. They were seen as touched by a destiny that was both glorious and tragic. They were the Fisher Kings of legend, wounded in the thigh, a euphemism for the reproductive line, waiting for a healing that only the future could bring. As the Renaissance dawned, bringing with it a hunger for dissection and anatomy, the view of blood began to shift. The artist-scientists, men like Leonardo da Vinci, began to look at the body not as a vessel of spirits, but as a masterpiece of mechanics. They traced the veins. They drew the valves of the heart. They began to see the river of life as a hydraulic system. Yet, even Da Vinci, with his scalpel and his genius, could not see the proteins. The silent glitch remained silent. The difference was still felt, not measured. It existed in the temperament of the people, in the inexplicable resistances to certain diseases, in the strange patterns of inheritance that defied the simple logic of the time. The Rh-negative individuals moved through this era like living vessels of an ancient alchemy. They were carrying a version of humanity that felt almost otherworldly in its scarcity. In a crowded marketplace of Florence or London, surrounded by the noise and the filth and the vitality of the common man, the negative carrier might have felt a subtle dissonance, a feeling of being a stranger in a strange land. This feeling is the psychology of the mutation. When an organism is genetically distinct from the herd, Does it manifest in the psyche? Does the biological solitude create an emotional solitude? The alchemists would say yes. They would say that the microcosm, the body, reflects the macrocosm, the universe. A rare blood creates a rare soul. They were the human equivalent of rare stars in the night sky, consistent, enduring, yet fundamentally different from the vast constellations that surrounded them. The constellation of the positive is a sprawling connected network, a grid of light that covers the globe. The star of the negative is a lonely point of light, burning with a cool, silver intensity, separated by vast distances of dark matter. But it is the rare stars that often guide the mariner. It is the anomalies that teach us the rules. The alchemist, after a long night of failure, watches the dawn break over the city. He pours the blood from his vial onto the earth. He has not found the elixir of life. He has not turned lead into gold, but he has touched the mystery. He has looked into the crimson depths and seen a reflection of something ancient and unsolved. He does not know that within that fluid lies a history that goes back to the African Savannah, to the ice of the Pyrenees, to the silence of the pre-verbal world. He does not know that the gold he seeks is not a metal, but a molecule, or rather, the absence of a molecule. The alchemist's crimson gold is the story of how we tried to understand our own diversity before we had the words for it. It is the story of how we took a biological accident and wrapped it in the robes of royalty and the symbols of the divine. It reminds us that long before we were data points in a medical file, we were myths to ourselves. And as the age of the alchemist fades, giving way to the age of the chemist, the silver thread remains. It waits for the lens grinder to polish the glass. It waits for the moment when the invisible shield will finally be seen. But the mystery of that era, the sense that blood is the seat of the soul, and that some blood is written in a different script, lingers. It haunts our literature, our legends, and our dreams. We are still seeking the gold. We are still trying to understand the alchemy of what makes us who we are. And for the carrier of the negative blood, looking back at this chapter of history is like looking into a mirror clouded by smoke. You see your ancestors there, wearing crowns and holding alembics, misunderstood and revered, carrying the weight of their difference through the velvet darkness of the past. The sun rises higher. The glass vessels cool. The alchemist sleeps. But the blood flows on, a secret river winding its way toward the light of the modern day, carrying its ancient unanswered question with it. The page turns. The microscope is placed on the table. The eye descends to the eyepiece, and the world is about to change again. The wheel of time has turned again, grinding forward with the relentless momentum of the ages, carrying us out of the smoky, shadow-filled chambers of the alchemists and into the blinding, sterile luminescence of the modern world. We have left behind the era of parchment and superstition, where the blood was a mystical fluid governed by the phases of the moon and the whims of the gods. We have arrived in the age of glass and steel, an era where the mysteries of the body are laid bare under the unforgiving gaze of the electron microscope. It is here, in the quiet, climate-controlled hum of the 21st century laboratory, that we have finally given a name to the ancient ghost that has haunted our lineage for 300,000 years. We call it Rh-negative. It is a clinical term, dry and precise, born of the categorization that defines our scientific age. It sounds like a coordinate, a classification, a simple binary in a medical file. But pause for a moment. Let the syllables settle in the air. Strip away the white coat of the terminology and look at the phenomenon itself, for it is anything but clinical. It is the echo of the ice. It is the memory of the mountain. It is the persistent refusal of a specific strand of humanity to conform to the biological standard of the primate order. Today, we see it not as a defect, though for decades of medical history it was viewed as a dangerous aberration, but as a fascinating vestige of our long, arduous climb through time. It is a biological antique, a piece of deep history carried in the living vessels of millions of people who walk the earth at this very moment. These individuals are the modern Sentinels. They are the guardians of a genetic variance that has survived the bottleneck of the Ice Age, the plagues of the Neolithic, and the silent wars of the womb, to emerge intact in the era of the smartphone and the skyscraper. Imagine the environment where this naming took place. It was not a cave nor a temple, but a laboratory in the mid-20th century. The air smelled of antiseptic and ozone. The light was fluorescent, buzzing with a frequency that the sensitives of the past might have found maddening. Two men, Landsteiner and Wiener, were peering into the crimson depths of the blood, comparing the red cells of humans with those of the rhesus macaque, our distant cousin who chatters in the trees of the old world. They found a protein on the surface of the monkey's blood cells, a tiny molecular structure, a flag of identification. They looked for it in humans, and in the vast majority, they found it. The old blood, the blood of the African Savannah, the blood of the deep primate connection, carried this same flag. It was a moment of biological confirmation. We are family. We are of the earth. But then the anomaly appeared. In a sample from a woman who had perhaps lost children to the yellow sickness, or a man whose blood clumped strangely when mixed with others, the flag was missing. The protein was absent. The surface of the cell was smooth, empty, stripped of the marker. It was a moment of profound scientific silence. Here was a human being who, chemically speaking, had stepped away from the family tree. They were rhesus negative. They did not carry the monkey's mark. This discovery changed the world. It turned the haunting shadow of the previous chapters into a problem that could be solved. But before we speak of the cure, let us speak of the carriers. Let us look at the modern Sentinel as they move through the landscape of the present day. They walk among us in the crowded streets of New York, Tokyo, London, and Buenos Aires. They stand on the subway platforms, surrounded by the crush of humanity, the noise of the trains, the digital chime of devices. To the naked eye, they are indistinguishable from the crowd. They wear the same clothes, speak the same languages, worry about the same mortgages and deadlines. But beneath the skin, in the secret rivers of their veins, they are carrying the silver silence. Consider a woman named Sarah, walking through a rain-slicked street in Seattle. She is an accountant, a creature of logic and numbers. She does not think of herself as a genetic anomaly. She does not know that her ancestors huddled in the caves of the Pyrenees, watching the glaciers advance. But her body remembers. Her immune system is patrolling the borders of her selfhood with the same fierce, xenophobic intensity that protected her foremothers from the Pleistocene parasites. When she steps into a clinic to donate blood, she enters a unique category. If she is O-negative, the purest distillation of this lineage, lacking both the rhesus protein and the A and B antigens, she is the universal donor. Her blood is a liquid treasure. It can be given to anyone. It can flow into the veins of a rhesus-positive man injured in a car crash, and his body will accept it. It is a blood of supreme neutrality, a blood that gives but asks for nothing in return. There is a poetic beauty in this. The lineage that was once defined by its isolation, by its inability to mix, has become the universal savior of the modern medical world. The fortress has become a fountain. Sarah's blood, stripped of markers, is the ghost blood that can slip past the defenses of any immune system, bringing oxygen and life to a dying stranger. In the emergency room, when there is no time to type and cross-match, the doctors call for the O-neg. They call for the blood of the outlier. In this way, the modern Sentinels are the philanthropists of biology. They carry a burden. They can only receive blood from their own kind, but they offer a gift to the entire species. It is a reversal of the ancient dynamic. The people of the mist are now the life support of the global village. But the most profound shift in the modern era is the taming of the womb. For thousands of years, as we have seen, the first breath was a moment of terror. The hemolytic disease of the newborn was a scythe that cut down the lineages of the negative blood, keeping the population small, keeping the sorrow fresh. Science, in its brilliance, found a way to trick the fortress. Visualize the moment of the solution. It is the late 1960s. Researchers discover that if they introduce a small amount of passive antibodies into the mother's system immediately after the birth of a positive child, a shot we now call ROGAM, they can mask the fetal cells that have spilled into her bloodstream. Think of it as a cloak of invisibility. The injection covers the offending rhesus proteins on the baby's escaped blood cells. When the mother's own immune system, the dragon we spoke of, wakes up and scans the blood for invaders, it sees nothing. The invaders are hidden. The alarm is not triggered. The memory cells are not created. The mother does not become sensitized. It is a molecular peace treaty. It is a hack of the evolutionary code. Because of this simple injection, the tragedy of the second child, and the third, and the fourth, has been erased from the developed world. A woman of the negative blood can now have a large family with a positive partner. The cursed cradle is full. The heartbreaking silence has been replaced by the noisy, chaotic joy of a house full of children. Let us witness a modern birth to fully feel the weight of this victory. A hospital room bathed in the soft blue light of monitors. The mother, Rh negative, has just delivered a healthy son, Rh positive. In the Stone Age, this moment would have started the countdown to tragedy for her future offspring. But now, a nurse enters. She carries a small syringe. It contains a serum distilled, ironically, from the blood of men and women who were sensitized. A serum of salvation made from the mechanism of the danger itself. With a quick, sharp prick, the serum enters the mother's muscle. It diffuses into her blood. It finds the baby's stray cells. It quietly, efficiently covers them up. The mother's immune system sleeps on, undisturbed. The future is safe. This is the miracle of the modern Sentinel. They are the first generation in history to carry this trait without the penalty of death. They are the liberated carriers. The price we spoke of, the biological toll, has been paid by science. And yet, the mystery remains. We have named it. We have managed it. We have mapped the gene to the short arm of chromosome 1, but we still do not know why. Why did the deletion happen? And more importantly, why does it persist? In the logic of evolution, a trait that kills babies should be selected against. It should be weeded out. Over 10,000 years, the frequency of the negative gene should have dropped to 0. But it hasn't. It holds steady, hovering around 15% in populations of European descent and appearing in pockets around the world. This persistence suggests that the story is not over. It suggests that the fortress of the veins is still doing something important, something we have not yet fully quantified with our gleaming machines. Perhaps the balanced polymorphism theory holds the key. This is the idea that nature loves a backup plan. In the computer age, we understand the value of redundancy. You do not store all your data on one drive. You keep a copy in the cloud, a copy on a hard disk, a copy in a vault. The Rh negative blood is the species' backup copy. It is a version of humanity that is resistant to different things. We know about the parasite resistance in the past. But what of the future? We live in a world of emerging viruses, of zoonotic diseases jumping from animals to humans. The old blood, the rhesus positive, is connected to the animal kingdom. It shares a handshake with the macaque and perhaps with the bat and the pangolin. But the negative blood has withdrawn its hand. Could it be that the modern sentinels are being kept in the gene pool as a firewall against a plague that has not yet arrived? Are they the designated survivors of a biological event that exists only in the probability curves of the future? There is a sense of deep time strategy here. Nature is playing a long game. It keeps the diversity in the deck, shuffling the cards, ensuring that no matter what environment arises, be it a new ice age, a new pathogen, or a shift in the very atmosphere, there will be a subset of humanity that is equipped to handle it. The modern Sentinels are also the Sentinels of information. In the age of the Internet, a new phenomenon has emerged. The people of the mist have found each other again, not in mountain valleys, but in digital chat rooms and forums. They share stories of their sensitivity, their high blood pressure, their strange reactions to medications, their feeling of being different. While science dismisses much of this as confirmation bias, there is a paleo-anthropological truth to their gathering. We are a tribal species. We seek our kin. And for those who have grown up feeling the subtle otherness of their biology, the blue blood feeling of the Alchemist's era, finding a community is a powerful thing. They call themselves Pyrenees. They trade theories about alien origins, a modern myth replacing the fairy changeling myth. They discuss their unique physiology. It is the folklore of the blood evolving in real time. It is the silver thread weaving a digital tapestry. But let us look deeper, past the screens and the serums, into the heart of the individual. What does it mean to be a sentinel today? It means carrying a reminder that we are not finished. Human evolution did not stop when we invented the wheel, or the steam engine, or the internet. We are still biological entities, subject to the drift and shift of our genes. The Rh-negative trait is a reminder that we are a work in progress. It is a reminder of our resilience. To survive as a lineage with a gene that actively works against reproduction is a feat of staggering endurance. It speaks to the strength of the mothers who bore the losses. It speaks to the strength of the communities that protected these unique individuals. When a person with negative blood walks down the street today, they are a walking monument to the survival of the exception. They are a living testament to the fact that you do not have to be like the majority to be vital. You do not have to have the protein to have a place. There is a quiet victory written in the language of their hearts. Every beat of an Rh-negative heart is a drum that beats a slightly different rhythm, a syncopated jazz in the symphony of the species. It is a superpower of endurance. As night falls over the modern city, turning the skyscrapers into pillars of light that rival the stars, the sentinel returns home. They may be tired from the noise of the day, that ancient sensitivity still vibrating in their nerves. They may check on their sleeping children, children who are here because of a molecular disguise. They look out the window at the moon, the same moon that watched the first walker, the same moon that illuminated the ice of the Pyrenees. They do not feel like an accident. They feel like a necessity. In the silence of the room, they might check their pulse. Thump, 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 thump. The blood flows. The river runs. It is silver in its silence, crimson in its life. It is the secret superpower that needs no cape and no flight. Its power is simply that it persists. And as we prepare to close the book on the history of this trait, we must ask ourselves, if the Rh-negative blood was the glitch that saved us in the past, what role will it play in the chapters yet to be written? The sentinel stands watch, not knowing the enemy, but ready, as always, to face the unseen. The laboratory lights flick off, but the code remains, glowing in the dark of the double helix, waiting for its next cue. The mystery is named, but it is not tamed. It is merely waiting. Drift with me now, deeper into the velvet folds of the night, leaving the modern world far behind. Let the gleaming lights of the laboratory fade, replaced by the soft, bioluminescent glow of the past. We have spoken of fortresses and sentinels, of alchemists and ice, but now we must turn our gaze inward, into the very cathedral of the self. We must walk down the spiral staircase of the double helix, descending into the crypts of our own biology, to confront a presence that has lingered there for 40,000 years. We often speak of ghosts as spirits that haunt the corridors of old houses, or spectral figures that linger on the edges of our vision in the fog. But there are ghosts far older, far more substantial, and far more intimate than these. There are ghosts that do not haunt our homes, but inhabit our veins. As we peer deeper into the code of life, reading the microscopic script with the lenses of our new science, the Rh negative trait stands revealed not merely as a mutation, but as a genetic ghost, a haunting physical reminder of the branches of the human tree that have long since vanished into the mist of extinction. Imagine a time when the Earth was not the sole dominion of Homo sapiens. Picture the world as it was 50,000 years ago. It is a planet of many voices, a chorus of different human kinds. We were not alone. To the east, in the vast wind-swept steppes of Asia, walked the Denisovans, a mysterious people of whom we know so little, save for a few fragments of bone and the ghost of their DNA. And to the north and west, in the ice-bound valleys of Europe and the Levant, lived the Neanderthals, the old ones, the masters of the cold, the strong and silent cousins who had adapted to the ice long before we left the cradle of Africa. These other humans were not monsters, nor were they simple beasts. They were intelligent, soulful beings. They buried their dead with flowers. They cared for their crippled and their elderly. They painted their bodies with red ochre and stared up at the same moon that watches over you tonight, wondering at the nature of the stars. They were different from us, yes. They were broader, stronger, their bones dense as limestone, their blood adapted to the freezing winds of the Pleistocene. And then, slowly, agonizingly, they faded. The forests claimed their campsites. The glaciers ground their bones to dust. Silence fell over their valleys. But did they truly vanish? Or did they leave something behind? There is a whisper in the scientific community, a theory that drifts like smoke through the halls of paleoanthropology, suggesting that the Rh-negative blood might be a parting gift from these lost ancestors. It is a thought that invites us to view ourselves not as a finished product, indistinguishable and uniform, but as a beautiful, unfinished mosaic. Let us transport ourselves back to the moment of contact. It is a twilight era, a time of overlapping worlds. The climate is in flux, the great pendulum swinging between the warmth of the interglacial and the crushing weight of the ice. A band of Homo sapiens, our direct ancestors, has moved north out of the Levant. They are tall, slender, dark-skinned runners of the plains, built for heat, built for endurance. They carry with them the old blood, the rhesus positive, the badge of their African heritage. They enter a valley in what is now the Balkans, or perhaps the south of France. The air here is different, thicker, colder, smelling of resin and wet wool. And there, across a river swollen with meltwater, they see them, the others. The Neanderthals stand on the opposite bank. They are pale, their skin adapted to absorb the weak northern sun. Their eyes are deep-set beneath heavy brows, protecting them from the glare of the snow. They are the people of the mist, the ones who have lived in the fortress of the north for 200,000 years. We often imagine these meetings as wars, as clashes of violence and blood. And surely there was conflict. But the genetic ghost tells a different story, a story of intimacy. It tells us that in the quiet of the night, when the weapons were laid down and the fire was the only truth, the boundaries between the species dissolved. A sapiens man, curious and compelled by a strange beauty, crosses the river. A Neanderthal woman, seeing a grace in the slender stranger, welcomes him. In the union of these two lineages, something profound occurred. It was not just bodies joining, it was a collision of deep time. It was the merging of two separate evolutionary experiments. And in the child born of that union, the blood of the South met the blood of the North. Is it possible that the Neanderthals, in their long isolation, had evolved the negative trait? Or perhaps the incompatibility between the two blood types, the riddle of the first breath we explored earlier, was born here, in this hybrid zone. If the Neanderthal carried a variant that clashed with the sapiens' blood, the resulting offspring would have been rare, fragile, and precious. The hybrid child would have been a living vessel of this synthesis, carrying the genetic memory of a vanishing world. Imagine the life of this hybrid child. Let us call him Elu. He grows up in a clan that is neither fully sapiens nor fully Neanderthal. Or perhaps he lives among his mother's people, the old ones. He is different. He has the high forehead of his father, but the heavy, powerful shoulders of his mother. And in his veins, he carries the ghost blood. He is the bridge. Elu walks through a world that is dying. The numbers of the Neanderthals are dwindling. The winters are becoming too harsh, or the game is becoming too scarce, or the encroaching sapiens are simply outcompeting them for resources. He sees the fires of his mother's people going out one by one like candles in a gale. He feels the loneliness of the endling, the last of a kind. But Elu survives. He mates, perhaps back into the sapiens population. He passes on his genes. And with those genes, he passes on the Rh negative trait. It slips into the sapiens genome like a secret message, a Trojan horse of heritage. It is a lingering echo of a different way of being human. This theory provides a haunting explanation for the fortress nature of the negative blood. The Neanderthals were the ultimate survivors of the cold. They lived in small, isolated groups, highly inbred, relying on extreme physical robustness. Perhaps the deletion of the rhesus protein was part of their specific adaptation, a way to strip the cell of unnecessary markers to streamline the blood for the hypoxic conditions of high altitudes and deep winters. Or perhaps it was simply a drift, a founder effect, that occurred in their lineage eons before we arrived. If this is true, then those who carry the Rh negative blood today are the living tombs of the Neanderthal. They are the keepers of the flame for a cousin who can no longer speak. When a person with this blood looks in the mirror, they are looking at a reflection that is partly other. They are the modern manifestation of that ancient, winter-adapted soul. This idea challenges the boundaries of what it means to be human. We like to think of ourselves as pure sapiens, the winners of the evolutionary race. But the ghost in the blood tells us that we are mongrels. We are mixtures. We are the result of accidental meetings and forbidden loves. We are chimeras, stitched together from the spare parts of the hominid family tree. And what of the Denisovans? Far to the east, in the Altai Mountains, they too left a ghost. We know they gave high-altitude adaptations to the Tibetans. Could they have contributed to the complex puzzle of our blood types as well? The silver thread we traced across the world matches the territories where these ancient cousins lingered longest, the mountains of Europe, the steppes of Central Asia. It suggests that the negative blood is the signature of the archaic, the mark of the ones who were here before. This perspective transforms the negative from a lack, a missing protein, into a presence. It is the presence of the past. Consider the sense of the unseen we discussed in Chapter 7. We attributed it to a heightened nervous system. Now, view it through the lens of the Neanderthal ghost. The Neanderthals had larger brains than we do, particularly in the regions devoted to vision and body control. They were masters of the physical world, predators of the highest order who lived in close, dangerous contact with woolly rhinos and cave lions. Their awareness had to be total. Their silent communication, their empathy, their ability to sit in stillness for hours, these were their survival tools. Perhaps the high sensitivity of the modern Rh negative individual is not a disorder, but a functioning piece of Neanderthal software running on sapiens hardware. It is the hunter's mind, operating in a world of farmers and accountants. It is a sensory legacy from a time when we needed to hear the footfall of a wolf on the snow 3 miles away. The genetic ghost also explains the rejection. The war in the womb is the war between the species reenacted on a cellular level. The sapiens' immune system, the mother, recognizing the archaic protein, the child, as foreign or vice versa. It is the biological memory of the time when we were two, not one. It is a scar of speciation that never quite healed. But let us move beyond the tragedy. Let us look at the beauty of this unfinished mosaic. The fact that this trait persists, that it was not washed away by the tide of history, suggests that the ghost has value. The Neanderthals and Denisovans were not failures. They were successful for hundreds of thousands of years. They had wisdoms and strengths we have forgotten. By absorbing them into our blood, we saved a part of them. We became the ark that carried them through the flood of extinction. The Rh-negative blood is a fragment of that mosaic that doesn't quite fit the standard pattern. It is the jagged piece of blue glass in a window of red, and in its misfit nature, it finds its true value. It creates diversity. It creates a reservoir of alternative immunities, alternative neurologies, alternative ways of perceiving the world. Imagine a library. It is vast, stretching up into the shadows, filled with millions of scrolls. This library is your blood. Most of the scrolls are written in the standard script of Homo sapiens. They tell the stories of the African sun, of the long walk out of the garden, of the invention of language. But in the corner of the library, in a section kept cool and dim, there are scrolls written in a different hand. The ink is older. The paper is made of different reeds. These are the Neanderthal scrolls. These are the Denisovan maps. Every time your heart beats, it circulates these ancient texts through your body. You are the living archive of deep time. You are the custodian of the lost tribes. The person with Rh-negative blood often feels a sense of not belonging, a subtle alienation from the modern world. Perhaps this is not psychological, but cellular. Perhaps it is the ghost longing for a world that no longer exists, a world of silence, of ice, of profound connection to the animal spirits. The Sehnsucht, the inconsolable longing, is the song of the ghost. But there is comfort here too. To carry the ghost is to never be truly alone. You walk with the strength of the survivors. You have the resilience of the ones who endured the longest winters. You are the vessel of a deep, deep history. As the snow begins to fall in our cinematic imagination, covering the modern cities and the ancient caves alike, we see the unity of it all. The sapiens and the Neanderthal are no longer separate. They are blended in the crimson fluid. The conflict has become a composition. The genetic ghost is not a poltergeist to be feared. It is an ancestor to be honored. It reminds us that our definition of human is fluid, expanding to include those we once called other. It teaches us that we are built from the ruin and the romance of the past. We are the sum of all who came before us. We are the clay of the earth, mixed with the stardust of mutation and tempered in the fire of survival. And for those who carry the negative trait, the clay contains a special grain of sand, a diamond dust left by a hand that looked different from ours, but held the same hope for the future. The ghost is silent now. The DNA is wound tight in the nucleus, sleeping. But it is there. It is always there. A secret signature. A hidden chapter. A memory carved in the marrow, waiting for us to remember not just who we are, but who we were. We are the living archives. And as we drift toward the final chapter of our journey, we carry this archive gently into the night, knowing that as long as the blood flows, the ghosts are not gone. They are merely travel companions on the long, winding road of life. The library is open, the story continues, and the ghost smiles, for it has been found. The fire of the day has finally burned down to embers, and the noise of the waking world has retreated into the shadows, leaving behind only the profound and heavy silence of the night. You are safe now. You are sheltered in the quiet sanctuary of the present moment, drifting toward the velvet shores of sleep. But before you surrender to the tide of dreams, Let us take one final lingering look at the river of life that flows within you. Let us stand on the banks of your own being and watch the crimson waters pass, carrying with them the debris of stars, the dust of mountains, and the memories of 1,000 generations. In this quiet hour, the distinction between the observer and the observed begins to blur. You are not merely a mind floating in the darkness. You are a landscape. You are a geography of bone and sinew, a continent of cells, and a history written in code. Whether you carry the ancient rhesus marker, the badge of the deep primate past, the heavy anchor of the positive, or whether you carry the silent negative void, the silver thread of the exception, you are a participant in a story that dwarfs the imagination. It is a story that began long before the first human foot pressed into the mud of the Rift Valley, long before the ice sheets carved the cathedrals of the north. It began in the silence of the cosmos, in the forging of the very elements that now race through your veins. Consider the iron that anchors your blood. It is the central pillar of the hemoglobin molecule, the magnet that holds the oxygen of this planet and delivers it to the fires of your metabolism. That iron was not born on Earth. It was forged in the catastrophic death throes of a star that exploded billions of years ago, scattering its heavy heart across the galaxy. You are a vessel of captured starlight. You are a walking piece of the universe, cooled and condensed, given form and consciousness. And within this cosmic solution, the drama of the rhesus factor is but a single beautiful stanza in a much longer poem. The Rh negative trait, that silent glitch we have followed from the mutation in the dark to the gleaming laboratories of the modern age, is more than just a biological fact. It is a poem written in the language of evolution, a song of survival that has lasted for thousands of generations. It is a testament to the stubbornness of life. Think of the odds against it. Think of the war in the womb, the tragic filter that should have extinguished this line eons ago. And yet it persists. It endures. It flows in the veins of 15% of the population of the Western world, a minority that refuses to vanish. This tells us something profound about what it means to be human. It tells us that being different is not a weakness, but a vital part of the human journey. Nature, in her infinite wisdom, does not strive for uniformity. She strives for a library of possibilities. She keeps the positive majority to anchor us to the earth, to connect us to the great family of mammals from which we sprang. But she keeps the negative minority to remind us that we are also something else, something wandering, something mutable, something that can survive on the edges of the map. As you lie there, feel the weight of your own body pressing into the mattress. This is the gravity of the earth claiming you, holding you. But feel also the lightness of your breath, the rhythm of your chest rising and falling. With every inhalation, you are reenacting the first breath of the infant. You are pulling the atmosphere into the fortress of your lungs, trusting that the blood will be there to catch it. If you are Rh negative, imagine that silver silence flowing through you. It is a secret superpower of persistence. It is a legacy of the outsiders who found a way to turn their isolation into an enduring heritage. It is the memory of the guardians of the high passes, the ones who looked out from the Pyrenees and saw a world of ice, yet did not despair. They built their fires. They painted their dreams on the cave walls. They survived, and because they survived, you are here. You are the echo of their resilience. You are the answer to their prayers for a future. If you are Rh positive, you are the bedrock. You are the continuity. You carry the old blood, the blood that has flowed unbroken since the dawn of the primates. You are the connection to the sun-drenched savannah, to the lush forests, to the great teeming abundance of life. But even you contain the potential for the ghost. The genes are hidden, recessive, sleeping in the helix, waiting for the right moment to re-emerge. We are all mixtures. We are all mosaics. The conflict is over now. The alchemist's crimson gold has been analyzed. The mystery of the first breath has been solved by the gentle intervention of science. The sorrow of the past has been transmuted into the diversity of the present. We no longer need to fear the blood. We can simply marvel at it. Picture the world as it spins in the darkness of space tonight. It is a blue marble, streaked with clouds, glowing with the electric spiderwebs of our cities. But strip away the buildings and the roads, and see the human family as a single, pulsing organism. See the bloodlines like rivers of light crisscrossing the globe. See the silver thread weaving through the Red Sea, creating a pattern of infinite complexity. We are one family, bound by 1,000 different threads, weaving a single eternal story of life. The Basque shepherd in the mountains, the Berber nomad under the desert stars, the Celtic fisherman on the gray Atlantic, and the modern commuter in the neon city, we are all kin. We are all survivors of the same great filter. We have all walked the same long road from the stardust to the sentient mind. As the world fades and the silence grows around you, let this knowledge wrap you like a warm blanket. You do not have to carry the weight of survival tonight. Your ancestors have already done that for you. They faced the cave bear and the glacier. They faced the plague and the fever. They faced the heartbreak of the cradle and the fear of the dark. They walked through the valley of the shadow so that you could lie here in safety and comfort and simply breathe. Your heart is a soft, rhythmic drum, beating a cadence that is older than the pyramids, older than the mountains. Thump, 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 thump. Listen to it. It is the sound of the Pleistocene. It is the sound of the Neolithic. It is the sound of the modern Sentinel. It does not tire. It does not question. It simply serves the life force that animates you. In the sleep of eons, we return to the source. We return to the state of pure being, before the divisions of positive and negative, before the labels of science and the myths of alchemy. We return to the primordial mud, to the dream time of the species. Imagine yourself drifting down that ancient river now. The water is warm and buoyant. The current is slow and steady. On the banks, you see the flickering fires of the ancestors. They are watching you pass, their faces illuminated by the flames. Neanderthals, Denisovans, early sapiens, the people of the mist, the desert wanderers. They do not speak, but they smile. They raise a hand in greeting. They acknowledge you as the carrier of the torch. You float past the great ice sheets, glowing blue in the moonlight. You float past the deep forests of the Mesolithic, smelling the pine and the rain. You float past the stone circles of the guardians, feeling the hum of the earth. You float past the alchemist's tower, seeing the candle in the window. And finally, you float into the vast, open ocean of the night. The stars above you are the same stars that guided them. The rare stars of the negative blood and the great constellations of the positive blood are all part of the same sky. The universe does not judge its children, it simply holds them. There is a deep peace in accepting the mystery. We do not need to know why the universe decided to delete a protein from a blood cell 40,000 years ago. We only need to know that it happened, and that because of it, the human story is richer, deeper, and more resilient. The glitch was not an error. It was an expansion. It was the universe opening a door to a new way of being. And you are that way of being. You are the result of the experiment. So let go of the questions. Let go of the classifications. Let the fortress of the veins lower its drawbridge. The war is over. The night is here. The biology that sustains you is a miracle of automation, a silent intelligence that will repair your cells, filter your blood, and dream your dreams while your conscious mind takes its rest. The sleep of eons is a restorative sleep. It is a sleep that reconnects you to the deep time of the planet. When you wake, you will be renewed, carrying the strength of the mountains and the clarity of the ice. But for now, there is only the drift. There is only the soft, velvet dark. Sleep now, knowing that the ancient memory of our origins is safe. It is carved forever in the marrow of your bones. It is written in the scarlet ink of your veins. It is whispered in the double helix that winds through every cell of your body. You are a child of the earth, a traveler of the ages, a keeper of the ghost, and a vessel of the light. The river widens, the sea approaches, the stars reflect on the water, turning the Red Sea into a silver ocean. The thread has been woven, the story has been told. The Sentinel rests. Good night, traveler. Good night, survivor. Good night, kin. The eons embrace you. The silence holds you. Sleep.